withering wilds and denizens of the Happy Hotel, and welcome to the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. This is the extra special Friday edition of our podcast, as Thursday, my normal release day, was my beautiful wife's birthday. Therefore, I couldn't be doing work for you and be a good husband. So, I made my choice, and it was the correct one. This week on the show, we have Mr. Chad Stroup. Chad has been singing in hardcore bands and writing since the mid-90s. He has 2 novels of note currently in press, one of which is the more recent Sexy Leper, and the more transcendental of the 2, Secrets of the Weird, both of which are fantastic works of fantasy horror, the likes of which we haven't seen since Clive Barker, since David Lynch, and most certainly since Mr. David Cronenberg. There's a lot to unpack about this episode, and I can't really begin to describe to you how much this man has accomplished. So without further ado, I give to you Mr. Chad Stroup on the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I know you're probably not all that familiar with what I've been doing with this podcast, but my first question is always an existential one, and it's always the same one.
Okay.
Which is, what is it that inspires like true existential dread in you? The one fear, the one existential fear that you have that it trumps all others, and it is the true terror of your being.
I guess just the first thing that pops in my head, I guess, would be the inevitability of eventually being forgotten.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think that's something that I can't speak for all creative types, but I think that's one of the many driving forces to create is to have something that has some permanence to it. You know, whether it's novels or records or art or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. I think that is something that's like, well, you know, one day there's going to be nobody left on this earth that knew me, you know, decades and decades from now. But, you know, like eventually, like the actual real me will be forgotten, but hopefully something I did will live on. And you know, so I got, just the fear of being completely forgotten and meaningless, you know, that everything's meaningless, I guess.
I mean, that ties completely into my fear. My fear is the complete and utter oblivion that falls without the known universe, as it were. Like there's going to be a nothing after every galaxy, whatnot. I mean, so that is not only physical death, but existential death and a spiritual death. Yeah. So it's the same thing as being forgotten. They all tie into one another. Yeah. And I think 85% of the answers I've gotten to this question fall into that same, you know, margin.
Yeah, it's the real deal. I mean, a lot of people will try to say they're not afraid of death, but I mean, that's really the only thing you have to surface. I mean, the whole cliche of, you know, death and taxes. I mean, that's reality.
Well, the thing is, like, I was raised by a Vietnam veteran, and you know, he used to always claim, like, yeah, I'm not afraid of dying, blah 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 blah. When I watched him die, he was afraid, man. He was not happy about it. We're all afraid to die. I mean, that's just what it is. So, I mean, anyone who claims otherwise I don't know if they're fooling themselves, but the rest of us know better.
Yeah, we're being honest with ourselves at least.
Mm-hmm. But I've in doing my due diligence with this interview, and as I expressed to you before, I had discovered your writing via people on Goodreads who, you know, I was talking about Koja and her works. And they're like, oh, you need to check this guy out.
I don't know how that led to me.
Well, think about it.
Order. I'm like, you're reading Koja. I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, cool.
It's body horror. It's existential horror. It's, you know, at least somewhat comes from the same, maybe not punk world as we do, but counterculture.
Yeah, she definitely includes that element in her work a little bit. I've noticed.
Yeah,
so there's that underlying, whether or not she has any direct background in punk. I mean, she's got that attitude to her writing for sure, and references it somehow. So,
in my opinion, she was part of, if not part of the scene, definitely informed by it to some degree.
Yeah.
But in doing my due diligence with you, our personal stories are eerily similar, because my mother was an English major, as I was, and I had learned to read way too young, pre-kindergarten young, and the first novel that I consumed with any sort of veracity was Pet Sematary when it came out as a novel.
Okay.
It was laying around, so Stephen King was my first exposure to the long-form written word. Before that, I had my father's books of poetry like Robert Service and Robert Frost and Dylan Thomas, which I'd fallen in love with first. But long-form prose, Stephen King, Pet Sematary, which I can still say with a great amount of certainty that the scene where the main character, who's Dr. Whomever, and Judd were making their way through the forest, past the Pet Cemetery to the Micmac burial ground, and the things they had heard and seen is imprinted in my young mind to the point where I can never get rid of it.
Yeah.
And thereafter, when Stephen King didn't become necessarily stale, but a little, not quite extreme enough, it led me to Mr. Clive Barker, who is still my all-time favorite horror author. Your favorite is Cabal, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Hellbound Heart was my first exposure because it was the cheapest at the drugstore. And it was in my local drugstore, which was literally a little local-owned, tiny storefront. I went in, and the only Clive Barker works were Hellbound Heart and I think at that time Books of Blood, and it was the compiled Books of Blood.
I mean, either way, that's a win. So
either way, it's a win. But I only had maybe like $2.12 in my pocket. So Hellbound Heart was a novella, so it was the cheapest. So that kind of spurned on my journey. So I think it's safe to say that for both of us, even though we'd probably both been exposed to punk at a very young age, because my first concert was The Clash opening up for The Who. My dad had taken me to see The Who.
Oh, wow.
So I had liked what I would later find out was punk, but didn't know. I didn't know I was a punk before I knew I was a punk, but I definitely knew I loved horror.
Yeah.
Before I was codified, dyed-in-the-wool punk rocker.
I can relate to that because my very first exposures to any sort of punk were through horror movies. I mean, you had the Dickies and Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Killer Clowns, yep.
Yeah, you had, of course, Return of the Living Dead with, The Damned and TSOL and the Cramps and all of that, 45 Grave. And then punk adjacent, we had Night of the Demons with the Bauhaus song and the scene in front of the fire and all that. It's just so all that stuff was already soaking in, but I didn't know, so I didn't know that what it was.
Yeah.
I was pretty young when that stuff was coming out, and I think I didn't have as much access to music then, but I had lots of access to movies, strangely, because I would go to the movies a lot with my family. So
yeah,
sometimes I think of it's funny. Return of the Living Dead. It reminds me of a memory being at one of those triple drive-ins.
Yep.
And we were watching some other movie, but Return of the Living Dead was playing on the screen adjacent to us, and I was watching it without sound, just going, man, I want to watch this movie. What the hell is this? This looks amazing. And I saw it not long after that, but I was just like, screw whatever the hell we're watching. I want to watch this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, what's great about that time period in which we'd both grown up, I mean, I'm 45 now. I'm sure you're somewhere within the vicinity of my age group.
Almost 47.
In that age group, we had that sort of music on MTV you know, on maybe college radio for me. I mean, I'm from the sticks. I'm from the Scranton area of Pennsylvania. We're only known for maybe a few things, one of them being The Office. And it wasn't even really shot here. It's just about here, you know. But well, we had college radio that offered that to us. But with the exception of that, like you said, we had, you know, Return of the Living Dead. And then when the Pet Sematary film came out, Stephen King was a big Ramones fan. So the Pet Sematary song, that kind of like horror and punk were kith and kin.
Yeah, this made sense. They were both kind of like the bastard children of their respective arts.
Right, right. But I think in that era, what was really interesting about horror specifically was comedy was getting injected into it in a very heavy way, as well as intellectualism. Because if you take the David Lynch path, you know, he put that existential intellectual dread and injected horror into it and made it almost like a Kafka, like a Kafka-esque romantic comedy with Eraserhead. Yeah, you know, and that I think vastly informs both of your novels, because the comedy is there, the romance is there. There's a lot of love involved. There's a lot of punk involved, and there's a lot of gore involved. but none of it supersedes the other. They're all well balanced, and the prose it's not like blue prose where someone is just, you know, like, as much as I really enjoy Jack Ketchum or Edward Lee, that's more exploitation, and I don't find what you write exploitative. It's more it's tasteful, but it's vulgar.
It's a fine line. It does.
You do straddle a great line though, because like the vulgarity it's there to be had, and it's there if you look for it, but you're not rubbing it in the reader's face.
Yeah. I think there's a time and a place for that. It's just not my personal approach. You know, I definitely appreciate, you know, a lot of that stuff, but it's never been the way I wanted to personally attack my writing. But I think I don't know. It just sort of subconsciously came that way. You really kind of understand my influences because, I mean, being a child who was born in the 70s but grew up in the 80s, that horror was everything to me. You know, the things like Evil Dead and Reanimator and things that really got really just bonkers, essentially. I mean, Evil Dead was like Three Stooges horror, essentially.
Legitimately, I mean, he was a fake chimp, you know.
You know, and there's just so much of that going on, like that I love so much, and I love that it was still played straight, even though it was so crazy and so over the top. You know, that comedy was there, but it wasn't like winky at you. You're like, oh, look what we're doing. It's very funny. It just was so absurd.
Yeah,
that it could not be funny. You know, and I love that, and I love that. I think that's just the excess of the '80s. You know, and that's how it influenced horror. And then you bring up Lynch, of course, and Twin Peaks when that came out. I think I was just like at the right age.
Yeah,
for that to hit me and go, okay, whoa, this is an interesting direction for things, and it's not obviously horror, but it is.
It is, in my opinion.
And I think, you know, the average person thinks of horror, you know, they think of slasher films, you know, and, you know, they don't think of all the other different subgenres when there's so, like you say, it's existential horror. And that's, if you're going to put it in a category, which, how can you put anything Lynch does in category aside from just Lynchian?
Yeah, it's at that point, it's Lynchian with the exception of maybe Dune.
Yeah.
Which was still good, but it wasn't a David Lynch film.
He was playing in somebody else's sandbox.
He really was. He really was, because I think he respected the source material enough to not inject his entire persona onto it. But in the same token, he still wanted to bring a style to it. And it just leads me to wonder what Jodorowsky would have done with it, really.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
That would have been fucking bonkers.
That reminds me, I need to really revisit that Lynch Dune. It's been a long time. I watched it a lot when I was a kid, and I had some of the toys and everything.
Yeah, I did too.
But it's been, 30, 35 years since I've seen it, and I just want to see it with fresh eyes now and just go, well, see if this holds up.
It does. It strangely does, and it complements the new one.
Yeah.
Believe it or not. I liked the new one just because of how...
It was good.
It was accurate, but it's the first half of the first book. So you're kind of like...
Now we gotta wait.
The fuck, man. Like I'm waiting for this to build to a crescendo, and we all know it's not going to happen. But I think your writing is, as much as it is informed by maybe a little bit of Clive Barker, a little bit of a Jack Ketchum. I think it's more informed by the films you watched than the books you'd read.
You might be right. Barker is definitely a big one. If we're going to go anywhere literary, he's the biggest one on me. I the whole, carnal edge of his writing was a mind warp to me, reading that stuff at a young age when I probably, by any parent's standards, probably shouldn't have been reading it. No,
neither of us should have been reading it when we were reading it. That's for damn sure.
I was like 12 when I read Cabal, I think,
Yep.
But it's one of those things, like you're saying, we both of us started reading at such an early level. Like I was reading at a 6th grade level by kindergarten. By 6th grade, I was reading at a college level. So it's like I needed something more, than this stuff that was being fed to me in school. And, I was already into horror movies, and I had read some Stephen King already before that, and I loved that. I think Night Shift was my first Stephen King book, and that's still my favorite collection of his.
As far as short stories are concerned, that is his best collection, in my opinion, as well.
And I don't even know how I found Clive Barker. It must have been, timeline-wise, it must have been that I'd probably seen Hellraiser.
That's what it was for me.
And then learned that he, was an author, and probably found Cabal from that. I'm guessing that's how it happened.
I'll correct myself. I'd seen Rawhead Rex first.
Oh, yeah.
Just based on my age, I saw Hellraiser when it came out in the drive-in.
Okay.
Because my mother she still doesn't completely know the ins and outs of what my father would take me to the movies and drive-ins to see, but we definitely went to see Hellraiser. Yeah. We definitely went to see Evil Dead 2 together. We got into some shit together, my dad and I. We were partners in crime. So, but when I'd recognized via the credits of Hellraiser, when I'd gone to the drugstore and purchased Hellbound Heart, I was like, wait, okay, Hellbound Heart. This is Hellraiser. This is it. Because I was already meticulous with film.
Yeah.
As far as watching credits. So I was like, oh fuck, this is it. And they were so vastly dissimilar, and Hellbound Heart is such a better work of art than the Hellraiser film. I was just consumed. And I can honestly say Cabal versus Nightbreed, same thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I love both the film versions of those for sure. But like anything, 99% of the time, the book's better.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think you mentioned Rawhead Rex, and I don't think I made the connection at the time of seeing Rawhead Rex with Barker, even though I should have, because like you, I was being very meticulous about things. And I was down at the newsstand at like age 5 reading Fangoria already.
Me too.
So I was looking for, the latest things coming out. Just, I didn't have the money to buy it. So they would be cool about me. I had a newsstand about 2 blocks from my house, and I would go down there and just be reading, as much as I could, without being rude. And just kind of looking, for, oh, this looked crazy. Let's see if we can rent this at the video store. Well, I don't know if it was that happening then. I don't know. My timelines are all off. I don't know if it was like that.
The video stores for you existed. Yeah. I rented videos from a hardware store.
Yeah.
Because I'm from a town of less than 2,000 people. That's where I grew up. But when the VHS boom happened, and the beta boom quite before it, we rented videos in the same place we bought our trash compactors and wrenches. It was a hardware store.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think video rentals, the advent thereof was 1981, 82 originally, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that timeline pretty much lines up then.
Yeah. I think you're about right there.
But yeah, getting back to your point, I think you're definitely onto something. I have said that to people at times, that I'm just as influenced by film. My film is just as influential on my prose as actual prose, if not more sometimes. And I think if I'm gonna like hone in on anything, it's the films of David Cronenberg.
Well, I was going to draw that comparison as well, especially earlier Cronenberg, because earlier Cronenberg was less self-aware.
Yeah.
And he wasn't afraid to be a little funny, not winking at you funny, but funny. Like Rabid's a funny movie.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Right? It's a little funny. It's a little crazy. And it's Canadian humor, so it's adjacent to British humor.
Yeah. It's really absurd. I mean, the whole concept is absurd.
Yeah.
And that's what attracted me to it. I think, I probably I'm guessing the first film I actually saw of his was probably The Fly.
Oh, okay.
Probably went backwards from there. I don't think I'd seen Videodrome at that point.
Scanners, Videodrome for me.
But I loved The Fly so much, and let me tell you, this is, that's a movie that to this day I still watch and bawl my eyes off at the end. I mean, it's just, no
one wants Brundle to die. Nobody with a heart. I mean, honestly, he didn't ask for that specifically. He was,
that's a painful movie. It's wonderful, but Videodrome I think is my favorite of his.
Videodrome is his best by far, and I think The Brood and Scanners are close seconds.
Yeah, Brood I think would be number 3 for me. That one has really aged very well. I watched that recently, and it's a scary movie. Like, and I don't say that much. Like, there's not very much that really scares me. Like, that movie is creepy.
Oh, it is. I think Lynch and Cronenberg have distinctions that they have the ability to still freak me out 40 years later.
Like, their stuff has standing power. It's even like you're saying, the earliest Cronenberg stuff, some of that stuff was really low budget.
Sure,
it still is effective, just despite that.
Because it was prescient. He had seen what was coming.
Yeah.
In his postmodern, almost Dadaist mind, he'd seen what was coming. The shape of punk to come, as it were.
Yeah.
Like he knew where we were headed, as not only as a culture, but as a consumerist culture.
And I think it helped a lot that he wrote so much, pretty close to all of what he did.
Yeah.
It was all him. It was all his vision versus, him just directing somebody else's story. And I think that's what makes his work so of its own and so wonderful, because it's all his, whatever's going on in his mind. I almost don't want to know, but I do at the same time.
That's why I really appreciated his novel so much, because it was definitely a window into his mind.
It was good. It was really good. I liked it, and I wish he would do more. I always tell people David Cronenberg is one of my favorite writers, and he's like, but he's a director. Well, he wrote like almost all of his films, and he has a novel out now too. So if we're just going to base it off the prose, it's a good book. It had a lot of elements of like his early film, but it's still kind of like tied into the sort of things he's doing in the modern day, and I thought it was really good. It's a keeper. It's on my shelf still.
Oh yeah, I have the hardcover of it. I'm still very proud of it in my collection. But I mean, we're talking about a guy who also, like, when he moved, his first really big move out of the fantastical and horror was Spider, which is actually a creepy fucking movie. Like, very, very creepy.
That one, I got to revisit that one.
Beautiful. But I think what you do not only is informed by film, but I actually kind of can't believe some independent filmmaker somewhere hasn't already looked to what you do and tried to option it at some point. I mean, Secrets of the Weird, I mean, that's a series.
I wish. It's kind of set up for that. It's sort of just, it's so character driven, and that's how you obviously read my stuff, so it's very character driven. So the most important thing to me is to have well drawn characters that you're going to want to be interested in, whether they're likable or not. I want them to be interesting, and we're gonna want to see what the hell they do, regardless if you love them or love to hate them.
Well, I actually like cared about Trixie within the first couple seconds, like just boom, like okay, this like I know this person. Yeah. I've known people like this person. Yeah. Like, especially coming from where we come from. Yeah. You're gonna care because we have that friend. We know that person.
Make her real. You know, like one of the things. So I wrote a little background on that book. So I got my MFA in creative writing at San Diego State University, which actually I live a few blocks from now. And that was my master's thesis. And when I was workshopping it with my mentor, one of the greatest comments he made on early version of the manuscript was that Trixie doesn't feel like a character. She feels like a real person with real problems.
She does.
And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm onto something here. That's what I want. You know, I don't want it to just be a character. I want you to be in this and, you know, be into her stakes and know what's up and just feel like it's your friend. You know, that you don't want these horrible things to happen to her. I mean, I put her through hell.
Oh, yeah.
So awful about.
but I mean, what the thing is there's a distinct realism with body dysmorphia. But like the trials and tribulations of this person who I'd grown up with and love, like I know it personally. I'd witnessed it. And Trixie's, struggle with body dysmorphia and everything that comes thereafter is very, very like just like it's organic, it's real, and I appreciated it.
Yeah, it was really crucial for me to again, kind of reiterating what I'm saying is not only just make her feel real, but I think one of the things I had to do to make her feel real is to make her very imperfect. Mm-hmm. To give her, as many flaws as were reasonable. I mean, because she does some things that aren't exactly the best choices, and it just, that's how we are as people. We're not perfect. We've all done some dirt. We've all done what we're proud of, and that was a huge portion of not just her, but for any character that I want to do, no matter great or small. And I think she was sort of the template for that. It's like, okay, I'm working this in, to just make her as well-rounded on both sides as I can, and I feel happy with the outcome of it. So.
Oh, it's so well executed. Sexy Leper, same way. Now that's the more fresh of the two in my mind, because I consumed it within a 18-hour period, and
your mind was warped.
Yeah, so my mind was a little warped. But what I find completely fascinating is the fact that it really is just kind of predicated on a piss taking about people wearing non-Halloween style Halloween costumes.
Yeah,
like dressing up all scantily clad for Halloween. I'm like, I've been pissed. I'm an Irishman in blood and in heart, and that comes from that comes from the Irish culture. Samhain,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we're supposed to dress up as something scary to keep the demons away from us or whatnot. But Halloween's supposed to be scary.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be so you can go out and get laid, per se.
Yeah.
And that felt like a reaction to that.
It absolutely was. And there's a backstory behind that. I mean, I've always had this, it's like, okay, so like you're saying, Halloween should be scary. I also think, weird, throw weird in there too. You think scary or weird or just like dark and strange, whatever, is sort of left of center of the norm in that sense. And it's not that I have a problem with people dressing sexy. It's not just the concept of that. Like, everybody has the right to do that, whatever. But it's just the fact that they're doing that on Halloween always irked me for some reason. It's just like, okay, it got to a certain point where you're seeing things like sexy Freddy Krueger, and I'm like, oh really? Where we have a burned child molester who is now sexy. And I don't know. It just got to a certain point where things were so ridiculous, and it's like, okay. And the real breaking point for me, I'm not going to name names on who this person was, but there was a person who was on social media and had said, that she was the type of person who was always seeking attention, by doing these selfies and, look at me, this and that. So it was totally this type of personality, the kind of person that would be the sexy costume for Halloween. Yeah. And she said that she wanted to be a sexy leopard. And I was like, oh, God. And 5 minutes later, a light bulb went off. And that was it. From there, just like, okay, I have a story.
What if you'd misheard her? Sexy leopard?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what if somebody wanted to be a sexy leopard for Halloween and they wanted a custom-made costume, but they didn't hear her right? And at first, that it was just a short story, and it wasn't even a horror story. It was just a dark comedy about something like that happening. Yeah. But it just wasn't working. I just couldn't get it to work, so I trunked it for a year or so. And then I had the whole idea, which is not a completely original idea. It's been done, before on like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or I think there was a Twilight Zone episode also, or the whole thing of turning into your costumes.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, okay, what if I did something like that? That's not been done that much. So how can I do a take on that? And then I remembered the sexy leopard thing. Like, oh, whoa, this could be really crazy. So yeah, it was just sort of a combining of ideas that ended up working out into the novel that it became.
Especially when you figure into the equation the fact that there's this damned love story. Like there's just, it's never going to be. You're rooting for her. Like something, she's got to get something out of Jake. Something.
But it's just a running theme in my books.
It really is. It really is like the unrequited, the missed opportunity, the yearning that is never fully realized.
I figure everybody can relate to that in some level.
Of course,
it's a universal thing, I guess. I don't know. I like having that. Not everything ends happy.
Well, I mean,
reality.
What really ends happy in either of your novels?
No, I don't like happy endings. I mean, they have their place. They're just not for me. I like dark with a little bit of ambiguity, and it just I don't know. It just feels more like real life to me. Things aren't tied up all neatly in a bow. There's things that are there was one criticism of Secrets of the Weird that a couple of people had said that I didn't tie up all the plot threads. I'm like, well, I did that on purpose. It wasn't like an oversight. I did that because life is not a plot thread. There are people you run into, and they become an important part of your life for X amount of time, and then suddenly you never hear from them again. It's that kind of a thing. Like I think life is messy, and I kind of wanted to portray that purposefully, instead of just like, oh, I have all these different little plot threads that I need to tie up all neatly and have everything presented to you at the end. It's all of that. And I didn't want that.
And especially like if you take the two and put them together, as much as I love Sexy Leper, Secrets of the Weird, to me, that seems like a universe that has just been begun to be mined, really.
Yeah.
That seems to like it's going to continue somewhere.
I hope so. I have like a lot of ideas for that. I think it would need to find a stronger audience at this point before I actually pursued that. But I have so many notes on where that universe would go and other characters that would be introduced into it and just so many things. I would love to do that again at some point if it's warranted.
Well, I mean, there's so much going on within the context of that universe that, I mean, you can't even call them subplots, but there's so many characters that are explored, but not explored to the point where it's, you leave people not unsatisfied, but their interest piqued enough that they want to know more.
Yeah. I think like the Grayson and Oren Zane are probably a perfect example of that.
They are very much so. Yes.
They have their place in the story, but they don't, they don't factor into how it wraps up or anything, but they're there for a reason. And they're very bizarre people.
I feel like that was a very calculated move on your part. Like Like you weren't quite ready to let these characters go personally. And this is coming from someone who also writes, so I recognize that. So maybe to the untrained reader, they're going to be interested in it, but not see maybe I can't even say they don't see the potential, because the potential's obvious, but just not see that there's a thread there that is unfinished and was intended maybe to be expounded upon in the future.
Yeah. There's a lot of little drops in there, just things, little tastes that, would sort of sow the seeds for something potential later on. With most of the characters, I think, like some of them might not necessarily have needed too much more exploration, but I wrote each character with such, like, I don't know, I gave them such an important job for their own, needs, that I enjoyed writing all of them. Even a character like Cypress, who is the absolute hardest character for me to write, because I'm like, how do I make a white supremacist sympathetic?
My favorite, and having grown up in a just cards on the table, there was a lot of white supremacy in the scene I grew up in, to the point where like it affected my life in a very big way. I've talked about it on the podcast before. Like I actually went to a boys' reformatory when I was a kid because I got into an altercation with white supremacists and ran one over with my car.
Wow.
Yeah. Like I was a sharp dude. I was not fucking with these people. And like having blood relations with people of color, I was really not fucking with them. So, but in the same token, Cypress's character, like, very sympathetic.
Yeah, I wanted to. With her, it was one of those fine lines. I wanted to make sure she wasn't a monster, because the important thing to me is that you have to remember people with these point of views are people. That's what makes them scary.
Affected
there are neighbors, there are family members, they're the person walking down the street that you don't know a thing about. And I wanted to give her reasons, whether they're valid or not, they're valid to her, for why she became the way she was.
Yeah.
And that you could probably see that she might even be the sort of person that maybe years down the line might see the error of her ways. Right now, certainly not. She's bullheaded as can be, but just to sort of look within and see, like, oh, there's always a reason. It's usually not even remotely valid reason. And well, I'm going to say there's never a valid reason, but I think to justify that, some way they'll find some sort of justification for what they're believing that, and you just have to sort of get to that core. And I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of babbling about this. It's a really tough thing to talk about.
No, it's not, though, especially in the context of my show, because I mean, anybody who is a constant listener of what I do, they know this shit. It's nothing. It's nothing new, and we all know that these people, these white supremacist, Nazi, racist skinheads, most of them are ill-informed. Mm-hmm. Most of them are emotional and didn't have proper guidance. God knows what I would have been had my parents not been liberal. Mm-hmm. And, like, it kind of pushed me in the direction I went to. I'm like, God knows what I could have been. Yeah. God knows. Yeah. Thankfully that I didn't. That's
a part of a conversation we can put on hold for a little later and we can talk about something else. But that ties into something that I think will come up later in the conversation.
Okay.
I'm taking note of that.
Okay. But I mean, like you'd written it with such care and lack of, judgment. You didn't judge this person. You gave them life without regard for how it would be viewed. It's true. It's something very true and very realistic. And I appreciated that. And that's why Cypress is my favorite character in Secrets of the Weird. because it's real. It's authentic, and and unabashed and caution thrown directly to the wind.
Do you have any least favorite characters in Secrets? I asked the question, so I'm not going to be offended if you have any.
I actually don't, just because everyone is so beautifully flawed and ties so like that. That's like asking me if I have a least favorite character in Stephen King's The Stand.
Okay.
I mean, Randall Flagg is morally reprehensible, but drives the story. Yeah. And what's her face? His bride. What's her name in The Stand? Yeah. Like, you're supposed to hate her too because she's just so malleable, but no, she's perfect for the story. So no, I don't have a least favorite.
Okay.
I don't think that
it's a weird question, but
no, it's not a weird question, but the fact that I like the most morally reprehensible aspect of the book, that lends itself to the kinetic energy of the novel itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? There has to be a dark thrust to a horror novel.
Yeah.
And to me, that's kind of like the darkest underbelly.
Which Secrets of the Weird is kind of weird. Like, you know, it is in its core, I guess, you know, a horror novel, but I always like hesitate to use that with that particular book because, again, that genre term conjures up so many things. And I'm like, well, how do I explain this book? Because yeah, it's horror, but it also isn't in a lot of ways because it's so left of center.
Right.
But I just have to say, you know, I have to bring up things like, you know, it's a little more, you know, on the, you know, Twin Peaks side of things, kind of like that, but it's very punk rock.
Yeah, it's very punk rock.
A lot of people don't know Clive Barker. If they're not readers, they don't know Barker, you know, so I can't really reference him unless it's to an avid reader. So it's just like a casual person asking about my books, you know, sometimes they'll give me blank stares. Mm-hmm. Twin Peaks is usually one that they kind of recognize. It's like, okay, I've heard of that. I know what that is, or I've seen that, you know, so I kind of use that as a guideline. If you're into kind of weird, slightly surreal, but still grounded in, you know, characters, like, you know, this is for you. It's not slasher. It's not, you know, it's not a monster book. You know, I love monsters, but that's not what this is. There are kind of monsters in it. In, you know, the Withering Wilds. What else are you going to call those? I don't know. I don't even know, and I made them up.
Yeah. Well, they're abstractions. That's my best guess. They're abstractions of personalities.
And they were sort of in a lot of ways, they were kind of a red herring in that book because I think a lot of people thought that they were going to be this big driving horror force, and I was like, no, I threw them in there to be more of an annoyance. They're pesky, you know, things that are just existing in this world. It's just showing you like a full view of the world. It's like, no, they're just pests. They're a complete annoyance. They're not the driving force of the horror in this book.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in both of your books, the fantastical things that are occurring are just kind of happenstance to the universe, but the direct horror is human based. Mm-hmm. and ego based.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Both. Definitely. You know, and the character in Sexy Leper, who is very much based on Alex from Clockwork Orange, he is just, oh God, he's such a fucking prick. But
there's a lot of fucking pricks in that book. I mean, a lot of unlikable characters in that book.
But he's the only one that I don't like of both books. If there's a character that, okay, you want to ask me who I dislike, it's him. Because he revels in his inhumanity.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that doesn't really quite occur in Secrets of the Weird so much as Sexy Leper. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, this guy is just, no, he's based on, you know, a horror film character that occurs within the context of your book. Yeah. But he's also, in my mind, based on Alex from Burgess's Clockwork Orange.
That's probably a subconscious thing. I mean, that's one of my favorite books and movies. So.
Oh yeah, and when you take into consideration what Burgess went through in order to craft that novel,
yeah,
you know. But I mean, like he's running around in a jumpsuit and a bowler hat. I mean, that's kind of Alex, you know.
Yeah.
And even if you kind of like disabuse yourself of that notion and just take him on how he revels in his own transformation, motherfucker, evil prick, like true evil prick to the nth degree.
Yes.
So I almost want to assume that as much as I think he's based on Alex, he's based on someone you know.
Again, if that was the case, it was probably a subconscious thing.
Okay.
I cannot confirm nor deny that because I don't know. There's nobody actively in my life right in the last few years I can think of that he would be directly based on. But I mean, I'm sure I've encountered people along the way, along the trail of life like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, and it's also, I mean, it's a parody of sorts too. I mean, it's the whole excess of the Hollywood life and all of that, I think is in there. And I think just taking it to that extreme with the personalities of, a young subset of people in the Hollywood Hills and all that. It's satire. It's,
yeah. Especially since neither of us come from an affluence of that degree that we could even not even remotely that
was hard because it wasn't that hard to write a lot of the characters in Secrets because they were more on my level. I mean, I write about, I mean, I'm not going to say I grew up, completely impoverished or anything like that. I had my needs, met, but it's not like I had parents who could buy me a car or something like that or anything.
Yeah, no, me neither.
Like that. So, that's all that is kind of foreign to me. So when you have people in Secrets of the Weird, I mean, somebody like Christopher, who is very like me in a lot of ways, more ways than one for sure. He was very easy to write because, it's just on that same level, I mean, he worked at a pizza place. I worked at a pizza place. I know what that's like, it's just very easy. But to write these other characters, except for Kat, who was, kind of in that crowd and she was not as affluent, so
no, she was working retail. She knew.
But all of her friends that, she somehow infiltrated, this circle of friends who all came from, much, much greater wealth. It was just a lot harder to get into that mindset. I'm like, what is it like, to be somebody who grew up with the, silver spoon in your mouth, how do I get into that mindset? And that was not easy.
Yeah. Especially since and I didn't see it as class warfare at all.
Yeah.
When you read it, it's not as if there isn't some empathy for their plight at all. It doesn't read that way, but there's definitely an outsider perspective, mostly based on Kat and her foil and her best friend Hannah, her best friend. Isn't that her name?
Yeah,
Hannah. I mean, they're two sides of a very different coin.
Yeah.
But there's a tie that binds, and I think that endears Hannah to the reader.
Yeah. Yeah, she was.
Otherwise, you're not going to care about her getting butchered in a pool as a mermaid. You're not going to.
Yeah, Hannah was a cool character because she's just is who she is. I mean, she's just you're kind of basic. She's not like a mean girl. She's a rich girl, and she kind of has a devil may care attitude. Mm-hmm. She's just she's just a party girl. She's just all about having fun. I mean, like a lot of people, girls her age, especially ones who are in the position she is to, be able to have the sorts of fun she has. And I think there's, it's I had to just make her a friend, make her a good friend. She's somebody that would be there for Kat, and Kat would be there for her. So the money didn't matter. It didn't matter that they came from different financial backgrounds. So I didn't want to have. I don't know. I guess, it was important to have some people who were jerks and some that were not, just to balance it out, because just like everything else, you're going to have assholes who are poor and assholes who are rich and the opposite of both. So That's just the world.
So where did and if any, like anyone who isn't fully aware, like there is that tie to the goddess Kali.
Yeah.
And and the mother's name was Ma. I mean, Kali Ma Shakti Day. Like there's that whole tie together. And like was there an inherent like tie to your maybe like love of the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, or
well, I did love that when I was a kid.
Yeah, we all did, but like the love of Indian mythology in general, because Kali figures very heavily into Indian mythology.
Yeah, I mean, I have a respect for it, but I think it was for that, including it was just because it's something that I hadn't really seen much in a horror story.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. They exist. But you just don't get that. And I don't have a full, inside track to all of that, So, I didn't want to get too deep into it and sort of, make it my own thing versus just a direct pull from Indian mythology. But I did a little research and kind of picked and choose some things and made it what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So you could still get where it was coming from, but not have it be an exact, draw from any direct part of that mythology, I guess.
Well, and what's interesting about that too is like the implied deeper, like overarching plot
mm-hmm.
by this family, to infiltrate the affluent in Hollywood. That nefarious aspect. It's almost like it's almost Charles Manson-esque in a supernatural bent.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's a little bit of that, but I guess there's a little bit of the working class versus the affluent sort of thing too. I mean, again, it was, even though the family that owns the costume shop are the bad guys, mm-hmm. per se, they still had to have their own good reasons for what they were doing. And,
Mahib is just as much a victim as anyone else.
Yeah.
In my opinion, anyway, that's how it reads to me.
Yeah, I would say that.
I mean, you have the guy who's the talent behind it all, mm-hmm. Making the costumes look as good as they do, as realistic as they do, and kind of driving the whole thing, but he's the one who's shit on.
Yeah.
He's the outcast of his own, social caste.
Yeah.
And ultimately, he's dispatched in a fashion that is congruent with his standing with his own family, and it's anticlimactic, but it's hilarious in the same stroke, because he lived as he died, an afterthought.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of that in that book.
Yeah. Yeah, and no one really gets to, just like your first book, nobody really gets to wrap anything up in a really tidy bow. No. Like you said, just like reality, there's no nice, pretty bow to put on.
I'm sure some people are pretty mad about the ending of that one. They're like, we got a very, very dark ending. This is not good. This is not what we were hoping for.
Well, I mean, like any really good horror novel that has a happy ending, it knocks the wind right out of my sails. Like I don't want a happy ending. I want something that's going to kind of keep me in the mood it had begun in. Like the Damnation game doesn't have a happy ending. Right. It's just pretty much any novel that I've truly loved within the last 40 years, if it ends happily, it's hackneyed in some capacity to me.
I feel like that. I mean, it probably happens a lot more in things that are more pushed toward the mainstream. I think it's probably more like sort of, I don't want to say coerced, but sort of encouraged, I guess.
Yeah.
By larger publishers because it's something I think that the general public expects more and wants to consume more. I think they want it as their escape, you know, and then they get it all wrapped up and like, oh, I can feel okay at the end, you know. But I'm like, I want people to not feel okay because there's plenty to not feel okay about. I want you to feel uncomfortable. I want you to think about something, like you really just like be left like, oh, like I'm getting sidetracked here, but I remember, okay, so back when the movie Life is Beautiful came out,
mm-hmm.
I didn't know a thing about that movie. Me and a friend went to see it, and it was like, oh, okay, this is like a funny, like romantic comedy. Like, oh, this is enjoyable. It's cool. It's not my genre. And then it gets to the last, you know, third of the movie, and when we got to the end, we sat there 10 minutes after the credits in silence, just like, wow, what did we just see?
Yeah.
Like, you know, something like that. And it's just like, you did not get a happy ending. No, you did not.
No.
But I mean, that movie will stick with me to this day because of that. You know, just, you know, like, so it can be done. You know, you can do that and still, you know, I mean, that movie won so many awards. You know, it's there are people that want that stuff. So it just has to be done in the right way, I guess. But yeah, I think that's just important to me to not. You want to, you know, tease some happiness, I guess, because, you know, there is happiness in life, and you want to give things where they belong.
Yeah.
In the story, but it's sort of like getting, you know, okay. So in Secrets of the Weird, I mean, you have this budding relationship with Christopher and Trixie. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of good things that happen along the way, you know, and you get these little like sweet moments, you know, in their relationship, and then, you know, what happens after that? Well, you might not get what you want.
No. And in the same token with Kat, you know, and her relationship with Jake, there's these glimmers, you know, where like, okay, this can pull through, but I mean, she, in all actuality, she has spiritually inflicted leprosy.
Yeah.
Like, how the fuck's that gonna end? And
then, of course, there's the whole scene where they do look like things are gonna start working more. Yeah. What do I do there?
Yeah.
No spoilers, but you know what happens.
Yeah, I do.
What did I do there? Ooh, wow.
I mean, like,
it's not a good scene for
it's not a good scene for anyone who's sexually active in general, actually.
But I knew that was a scene that I knew was going to happen pretty early on in the writing of that novel. I'm like, I have to have this really awful, disgusting moment happen.
Yeah.
This is just something. And you bring up, you know, the things that, like, about, you think my books would make good film versions, and I've had other people say that too, and which it means a lot to me. I'm like, I wish that would become a reality. You know, that it would be huge, obviously. But like, I think of things when I write a lot, and I think this comes back to you saying film influences my prose a lot. I think of things in sort of movie scenes in my head when I'm writing.
Yeah.
So a scene like that, I totally pictured how that would play out on a screen were it to be filmed. I'm like, oh, that would be the moment people are screaming, man. Like,
yeah.
Like,
oh,
what
yeah.
the hell did I just see? You know, that one in the hot dog scene would be the ones.
Oh, the hot dog! I mean, the hot dog scene. Holy.
People have told me they've sworn off hot dogs for life after reading that.
Well, if I weren't vegan, I mean, I'd be a little fucked up over it. I mean,
I feel like I'm doing the good vegan service for that.
You are actually doing the good work right there. I mean, Earth Crisis and Green Rage would thank you right now. All the hardline vegan bands would be on your team.
Oh, jeez.
So I guess to take it to the music side then, when did you get... Now, how do you pronounce Icepield? Is that how you...
That's exactly how you pronounce it.
Icepield. When did you first start with that project?
It would have been... I guess the seed was sown probably around summertime last year. I ran into my friend Tim, who was the guitar player at his work, and we were just talking for a little bit. And I hadn't been in a band for quite a while, and we were just kind of talking. And I was talking about how like I really miss it. Like one of my bands, StickFigureCarousel, did a couple of reunion shows 2 years ago.
We have a friend in common, by the way, actually, with Mike Blair.
Oh, okay. And he passed a few years ago, didn't he?
Mike passed. Mike moved to my area back in the mid '90s, and we were real close.
I kept in touch with him for a few years after he moved away because he was still doing the Nothing Left zine.
I wrote for Nothing Left. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So like I think until maybe the late '90s, I was still in touch with him a little bit, but I just lost touch after that. Oh, that's crazy. Small world.
I was a massive StickFigureCarousel fan.
That's amazing. That's cool. That's an honor. But yeah,
like fucking massive fan. Go ahead.
Okay, you're embarrassing me, man. So yeah, we got together and did those reunion shows because we just thought it'd be fun. We miss playing together. I mean, I love those guys. I've been in touch with those guys. For the most part. Some of them, more than others. But yeah, they've always been my friends, and they're great musicians. And we just thought it'd be fun to play a couple shows. And that really got me the itch to play again. I'm like, because I hadn't done a band, like full on band, before that in over a decade. So I'd really been at it because I got, that was when I was going to school, and then I got into grad school, and then I really started down the writing path, and I just didn't feel I had the time, and I was just so focused on getting into writing. But then I realized, okay, I missed it. So, but I wasn't going to push starting anything. I'm like, I'm just going to wait until the right kind of thing comes along, the right moment. So when I talked to my friend Tim, it all kind of clicked. He's like, okay, so I've got a couple songs that I wrote, let me send them to you, see what you think. And what he sent to me was exactly what I want to be doing right now. It was like one of those things. It's like, okay, yeah, this is it. This is totally what I want to do. Like I wanted to do something where I can sing more than scream, because one of the things that even though I enjoy doing those StickFigureCarousel reunions, one of the realities is that it's a lot harder to sustain that sort of vocal intensity at this age. Yeah. Without doing it, consistently over the years. I mean, you have somebody like, Jacob Bannon from Converge. He's been doing it, eons. So he's able to sustain his voice, I'm sure. Yeah. But, somebody like me who's only done it periodically, it's like, okay, that's hard. So I wanted to do something where I could just use more of a natural singing voice, but still have it fall somewhere within the punk realm. Yeah. And I feel like, I don't know what to say. Do I have a better singing voice than a screaming voice? But I feel like my singing voice is at least interesting. So I'm like, okay, I can do this. I'm going to try this out and just go that way. And, just do something that I guess you would call post-hardcore is the closest umbrella it would fall under. So, yeah, so we started getting together with Mike Camus, who is now the drummer. At first he was just going to be filling in on drums, and he's also the engineer, so he owns his own studio. So we got the three of us together and we started writing some songs. And then Mike decided he wanted to be in the band full time. Yeah. All right. Okay. So we got our 3 core members. So let's start writing some songs. And, we're at the point, it's taking some time. I mean, we're all old. We have our lives. We're busy, but we're getting there. We're on top of each other and trying to get together every couple of weeks and record these songs. Because we have a couple of releases coming out later in the year on Protagonist Music. So. Oh, nice. We're very excited to be working with them. Brendan's an awesome guy. Once we get this first batch of songs finished up, we have another friend who's learning the songs on bass, and we're gonna need to recruit a second guitar player, but then we can start kind of working towards playing live, which is also, exciting. I know there's a lot going on in the world that has been, preventing a lot of live music, obviously. Yeah, my band has been on hiatus for over a year and a half, so I understand. It makes me glad that I got into those StickFigureCarousel shows right before everything hit, because we timed that well, because otherwise we would have been screwed on trying to get something going for quite a while. But, right now it's like, okay, things aren't normal. It's not the way things were, so it's like we can just take our time. Let's just, let's write the songs the way we want to write. Let's make them as good as we can make them, get them mixed the way we want them. We're just going to take our time. We're in no rush. We're like, let's just get it done, and we'll get it done. And it's happening. It's coming together. And we'll find the right people will be playing. What's great, though, is the way I came to you, I didn't realize all of
your associations with StickFigureCarousel and everything. I read Secrets of the Weird first.
Mm-hmm.
Then I found you on Instagram. Then I started to realize, like, fuck, that's the dude from StickFigureCarousel.
That's hilarious.
Holy fuck! Like, this is like it all come. Mike Blair put that fucking record out. And it all just it started to spin closer to my orbit. It's as if it had meant to be. Like, I was pretty. It's an exciting little journey for me. For the listener, probably not. Like, they're probably just like, this guy's an asshole, whatever.
No, I mean, I'd be stoked. I mean, to me, like, something like, I mean, for a band like StickFigureCarousel, we were never a huge band. We weren't around very long. We didn't get to really tour. We never got out of SoCal. Like, we had plans. We were going to do stuff, and then we broke up. So it just never happened. Yeah, and we're kind of the band that could have and should have and almost did, but just didn't. So whenever somebody tells me that they're like really into that band, it just makes me so happy, because that was my first real band that did anything. I'd been in a couple bands that played a show or recorded a demo that never came out, or crap like that.
Yeah,
but that was the first band that did records and played several shows and like actually had people that got into us. And when I hear to this day, like, somebody from like Italy messaging me on Instagram, I'm like, oh, I'm a huge StickFigureCarousel fan, I love you guys. I'm like, how do you even know who the hell we are? Like, it just amazes me. But those records got around, I guess. I mean,
I can still see the cover of the album though, like with it's like a carnival ride in Spin.
Oh, the one that Mike put out.
Yeah. Like, it was very, everything about it was very memorable. But what you're doing now with Icepield, I think it really feels like it's adult and not boring. It's like what you would imagine a guy who's been into hardcore since he was a kid in our age group would be doing. Like, same thing with Be Well is a great example of a hardcore band that's comprised of people in our age group who are doing good music. Mm-hmm. And I only have 2 songs of yours that I'm familiar with, but in my opinion, it's very much it's artistically interesting, mm-hmm. while still remaining within the context of what we're into.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that's something that we were all like on board for. Just like, we wanted to still have a certain energy to it, but we didn't just be like your basic run of the mill, hardcore band or anything like that. It's like there's enough of that out there, and that's fine. It has its place, and I like a lot of it. Yeah, but it's just not fulfilling to me to do artistically. So I want to do something that's going to be a little different. That isn't going to be immediately like, oh, it falls into this box,
right?
Like, okay, but we're there's going to be some twists and turns on the songs you haven't heard yet. We're doing some weird stuff sometimes, and I think it's cool. It's not weird to reference another ice band. We're not like turning into Iceburn sort of Oasis or anything like that. But
it's not that weird. I like both of those bands, so I'd be on board for that too. Especially
I'm a big fan of the first Iceburn 7-inch and the first album. The Fire is a fantastic album. I like that a lot.
I like Hephaestus. I like Poetry of Fire. I like all of the Iceburn.
The new one's actually really good.
Yeah, it is excellent.
I listened to it. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna give it a chance. I haven't liked an Iceburn record in a while, but I listened to it. I'm like, you know what? It's actually really good. It's pretty heavy, and like, I was like, okay, all right.
I was always on board for Iceburn and Engine Kid. I was always on board for their stuff.
Engine Kid, 110%. Love that band. This reminds me, funny little anecdote. Okay, so are you familiar with the band that was in the Dynamic 7?
Yeah.
Okay, so we were playing a show once, and a friend of mine was in the crowd, and I guess somebody kind of next to him sort of disparagingly like turned to his friend and said, "What is this supposed to be, like Engine Kid or something?" I'm like, that's a fucking insult?
How is that an insult?
Like, thank you. I don't know. Like,
it's like, who are you trying to be, Quicksand?
If you're using that as a point, like, hey, I'll take it, man. That makes me ruled.
What the fuck?
I'm just like, okay. I always laugh about that. I'm like, okay, all right, yeah.
Yeah, there's no way that could be bad. I wish someone at my worst, or what they would perceive to be my worst, would compare me to Engine Kid.
Yeah, that's silly. I don't know. It's, I guess it's just a matter of, people not having a broad range of tastes, but, that's how it is in a lot of scenes, I guess. I've always been into a lot of different kind of music, and most of it, of course, on the underground tip, but it's something I really miss about the 90s. There was so much different stuff that you could kind of call hardcore that wasn't really like fitting into a box, and you'd get bills with 5 different bands that didn't sound a thing like another. And, there came to a certain point in time a few years later where you'd have, 5 bands that sounded like Youth of Today on the bill or something.
Yeah.
I would be totally cool with one band that sounded like that, but give me something else,
Yeah, well, you always had that, like that youth crew boom, or the math metal boom, or the neurosis wannabe boom. Like there was always that. There were always these factions, and it was almost like refreshing when people like the Mars Volta popped up, or like we need something else. I think right now, and I just interviewed Damien Moyal from As Friends Rust, and we were talking about this. Like right now in that scene, there's probably more varied musical styles happening within the umbrella of hardcore than probably in the early 90s.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, there's a lot of different stuff going on these days. And one thing I've noticed, and I'm seeing this kind of almost as an outsider, because I do, still go to shows, but I don't feel like that I'm directly part of a scene anymore like I was when I was younger. It's like, to me, it's just me and my old friends that, a bunch of us were in bands before, and, all of us still love music, and, we go to shows when we can and stuff, but like, it's not like I'm as directly involved by any means as much as I was, but it's like I still like to go see bands, whether they're old bands or new bands. If I like it, I like it. But one thing I've noticed, is kind of observing younger crowds, is that it's kind of catching up to the point that I always felt I always was, where it's just like I like a lot of different stuff, and I don't care what people think about it. Now, some of it goes even to the extreme, more even than I went, because I was never into very much mainstream music. I mean, it depends, depending on what you classify as mainstream. I mean, right. If you classify something as The Cure as mainstream, which, I mean, obviously they're an enormous band, and you ask average Joe on the street who The Cure is, you probably have heard of them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not like Lady Gaga or something like that.
No. I mean, when I was a kid, before I got into hardcore, my favorite band was The Cure.
Yeah. Yeah. They were like the gateway band into like, alternative sounds of music. They really were.
Yeah.
Like 87, I think, was when I got into them. And, but yeah, so like I see younger hardcore kids now who wouldn't be afraid to be like, hey, I'm a Lady Gaga fan.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And that may not be my thing, but like, it's like, hey, respect. That's cool. Like you're into like stuff and you're just into what you're into, and I think that it kind of comes into the way bands are sounding nowadays. Now, you may not have a band that directly sounds like that, but there's influences coming in are so subtle that you don't know, you don't really notice it. But I don't know. I just find it kind of fascinating, and I feel good about that. I feel that it's good that there's more diverse sounds, more diverse types of people playing in hardcore bands now. It's a positive thing. I don't have to like it all. Some of it's great. It's just not my thing. But the fact that it's happening, paramount. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I think when we were kids, when we were vital parts of that scene, the most pivotal band to hardcore that wasn't a hardcore band was probably Jane's Addiction, because Jane's Addiction launched Quicksand.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like Orange 9mm, like Into Another, like all of these bands that really revolutionized our scene, especially the Revelation Records based, hardcore scene, like even the guys from Chain of Strength were very influenced by that, and then you get your Sensefield, then you get your Far Sides, then you get like, you know what I mean? And actually, which is funny, Popeye is my neighbor now.
Oh, no way.
Popeye from Far Side is my neighbor now.
That's hilarious.
He lives right out, like legitimately a couple blocks up the road. I don't know why the frig he moved here, but
I had no idea. That's funny.
Yeah, it's funny as hell. Jane's Addiction, if you want to call them that, they were a major alternative rock band for that era. Yeah,
that was kind of at a time frame when like alternative rock still was an alternative. They were a huge band, and they got even huger from that. But I mean, those first 3 albums are just like insane. They're all just great, and it's sort of. You kind of wonder, it was just one of those sort of the right thing at the right time thing for them, I think, It just, the magic happened for them. If they had been 2 years earlier or 2 years later, they might not have hit. Yeah. You listen to Nothing's Shocking, and there's riffs on there that you can just make direct lines to Quicksand.
Yep.
It's just like, they're there. It's,
Quicksand, Seaweed, friggin' like, we wouldn't have them. We wouldn't have any of this stuff. And I mean, I could say the same thing for StickFigureCarousel because like it's in the guitar work.
Yeah, probably.
It's in there. It's in, and like I wouldn't have liked it otherwise, to be quite honest with you, because when StickFigureCarousel was happening and viable, we had Earth Crisis, Snapcase, whose Snapcase was great. That ilk of the Victory era, it was kind of when you guys were really hitting it off. Mm-hmm. And it was, what you were doing was very gay positive, very melodic, very like it was so ahead of the curve with a lot of the things that these Victory bands weren't talking about. And I think that's what made you guys stick out,
Okay, cool. That's awesome.
You had very gay positive lyrics. And to me, like having this, I knew my little brother was gay before he did. Mm-hmm. He was very young. And there was something I was searching for, like, something to kind of like grant credence and validity to my experience and to my empathy for people in that situation. And I was like, fuck, here it is.
There's this really, speaking to that particular song that you're talking about, Bundle of Sticks. There's
Bundle of Sticks. That's my favorite song by StickFigureCarousel.
There's a really infamous story that happened one time we played this show. Well, we put so the band Built to Last, we were friends with, and they were on the same label at the time, and I'm still friends with a couple of those guys to this day. They asked us to play a show with them. Okay, cool. We'll play a show, and the rest of the bands on the show were Christian hardcore bands, including No Innocent Victim.
Yeah.
And so we're like, fuck it, I don't care. This is not my thing. We'll play the show. Why do we have to just play our own scene? Let's do it. Cool. This is like very different from what we're about. This was one of our first shows. It was probably like our, I don't know, 4th or 5th show or something. And we just kind of went all out. Like we're gonna speak our mind about what we're about. So I got to that song and I was kind of explaining what it was about, and we started immediately getting crazy backlash. People were booing and hissing and like, kill the queers, yelling stuff at us and just crazy stuff. I was like, whoa. And Justin, our drummer, gets out from behind his kid and comes up and just plants a kiss on me, on my lips, right? Without me. This was not planned. I was like, oh God, okay, cool. And it was just this huge, like, it was, I don't know. It felt like such a fire at that moment. It was like, all right, well, we did what we had to do, and they didn't like it, and that's fine. I didn't think they would, but the one thing that really came out of that show that will forever stick with me, aside from the humor of that moment, was this kid comes up to me after the show and just kind of takes me aside and thanks me for saying that. He's like, I'm gay. I haven't told my parents yet. What you did right now just meant the world to me. Just thank you so much. And I was just kind of blown away. I was like, I didn't even think that they would have an impact, because to me, I don't care about if I'm impacting the world at large, but if I can impact one person and give them like some hope that like there's people that will give a shit about what they have going on, like that was like, oh, okay. that made the whole band worth it to me. I mean, like that moment, I was just like,
that's what hardcore is supposed to be about, Chad. That's what it is, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It was very meaningful, and you know, for many years. I mean, the lyrics I was writing were very, even though they were written in a very indirect way, they were about very direct things. I mean, I've moved away from that now just because I want to do something, a little different and do something.
Icepield to me is more. There's an artistic bent to it. There's a very poetic. But StickFigureCarousel, especially in the case of Bundle of Sticks, I mean, that was a great big middle finger, especially to the scene that was turning from something that was artistic and something that was inclusive to becoming more hardline. And I mean, I hate to disparage the straight edge movement, but that X was only a couple hatch marks away from a swastika, in my opinion, because everybody got really fucking hardline. And
there were some gang mentality things that were really starting to come together around that time, and that that was something I definitely had a problem with. I didn't.
We forgot we were a liberal scene for a minute there.
I always felt a lot more of a kinship with the bands that were from the Ebullition record scene and all that. Like that was more my thing, even though like our sound was much heavier than many of the bands. But of course, if you take like that straight edge comp that Ebullition did, I mean, that had bands like Groundwork and Threadbare. And, Threadbare, Groundwork, you're talking about artsy bands. Yeah.
And it's funny because when I just interviewed Damien Moyal from As Friends Rust, we talked about the same thing, ebullition envy. Mm-hmm. We had that ebullition, like that love for that scene and those bands. Like there was that born against kind of vibe, that Sam McPheeters mentality, where we were like, even though we were in the hardcore scene, we were outsiders within our own scene.
Yeah.
We had that, feeling like, this isn't straight edge, isn't my swastika. It's not my flag. It's my personal statement for how I feel about myself. And I was never straight edge. Mm-hmm. I was a sharp, I partied, but all my friends were straight edge, all my straight edge friends got me off of heroin.
Oh, wow.
But, there was that whole, codification of becoming an army of thugs, jocks, and assholes that I couldn't handle anymore. I was more like, if you want to take the straight edge vegan bands, I would rather be Chokehold than Earth Crisis, just because Chokehold were liberal.
Yeah. At the time, there were some members of that band that have since, not all, obviously, but I know there was some drama with one of them.
Yeah.
Very went the opposite way. Yeah, but at the time, certainly there was a very different. You have two bands with a very similar sound with a different approach to what they're doing.
Especially lyrically, and that's where I put you guys. You guys were definitely on that tip where there wasn't like that judgy. I don't know how that infiltrated our scene, to be honest with you. I don't know how.
It's really weird because, I don't know, from coming from San Diego and especially growing up in Chula Vista,
mm-hmm.
like that stuff doesn't make sense to me. I came in at the very tail end of when Amenity was still around, mm-hmm. and they were a very important band to not just Chula Vista but to San Diego as a whole. I mean, they're so much of the local scene is in the shadow of what they built. I mean, they were the straight edge scene for 4 or 5 years, and that's like huge, and then of course we had Unbroken not long after
Unbroken,
that. And all those guys obviously were, not your typical straight edge.
Because you go from Swing Kids into the Locust after that.
Yeah, it's just like, but like all of our scenes, we're tied together. I think, and I can't speak for every scene across the U.S. or across the world or whatever, but I feel like San Diego was really ahead of the curve on that, with just the bands kind of playing together that weren't exactly the same. And we had a lot of different influences coming in. And obviously we had, bands like End of the Line and Struggle that were on Ebullition, getting back to that thread line. I mean, so like we always had that tie there between those bands. There was a lot of political stuff, and
you had Tristeza and the Crimson Curse and all these like really fucking artsy, important.
Drive Like Jehu,
Drive Like Jehu, yeah, like Rocket from the Crypt, anything that Speedo had anything to do with.
And it's just, I don't know, I feel very thankful that I had, the chance factor of growing up in the scene that I did, that I think it helped really diversify my tastes musically and just, my approach to how I would do my own music, I guess. But
I think it makes Icepield make a lot more sense too, because like what you guys encompass is that like there's a very East Coast vibe to some of the music, especially when you consider Seaweed. Well, Seaweed's from the West Coast, but Quicksand, the early Iceburn, Engine Kid stuff, like that's in there.
Yeah.
But the melodicism and the urgency that lends itself very much to that, West Coast abolition, like it all mixes really well. And without wearing your influences on your sleeve, it makes itself apparent to the discerning listener.
Yeah, I would say so. We have a few shared influences within the band, but I think, our own influences that are coming in from each individual member are what is making it become what it is, more than just our shared influences.
Yeah. So I'm curious, because it didn't come up, the white power thing that you thought was going to come up in the conversation later that never seemed to come to a head. What were you going to bring up?
Oh no, it wasn't a white power thing specifically. It was more general, talking about growing up a certain way. Growing up a different way, because that ties in to my next novel that's slated to come out in November.
Oh shit!
So yeah, I just signed a contract at the end of 2021 for a new novel called Shivering Holes. Which, if you think hard enough, you'll get the reference.
Okay.
So it's a reference to a lyric by a band we just talked about a few minutes ago. But it's coming out on Gray Matter Press, who did Secrets of the Weird. Mm-hmm. So I'm very excited to work with them again, because that was a really wonderful editing experience. Tony Rivera, the editor of that press, he really gets the core of my stuff. He sees what I'm going for, and if what I'm going for isn't working in that particular moment, he knows how to get the right moment out of me. So it's really great to work with somebody on the editing level like that, like that really just understands what you want to do and can pull the best version of that out. So this particular story, I guess there's a lot to talk about this one. We can have a little conversation about this. I'll tell you some background about it and stuff in a second. But
okay,
the log line for the book is essentially there's an artist with a history of mental illness who discovers in his 30s that he was adopted, and simultaneously discovers that he may or may not have a doppelganger trying to take over his life.
Oh shit!
And the doppelganger is essentially his birth name, who has existed, like, for lack of a better term, in another dimension. It's not really what it is, but nobody at this point is going to understand without reading the book what it is. So, let's just say that for discussion purposes, another dimension, quote unquote, and has been existing, concurrently with the protagonist, but has been living a completely different life. He was raised differently, and he's been getting the short end of the stick, because he turned out, however he turned out, and he sees this chance to take over this other person's life, who is essentially him, or who he could have been. And that's sort of kind of the impetus for the novel. And it's I call it sort of a tightrope balance between psychological thriller and supernatural horror.
Oh, nice.
We're essentially not supposed to know throughout the book whether this doppelganger is a manifestation of the protagonist's mental illness, or if it's an actual supernatural entity. And try to kind of weave it to the point where it could be either, depending on how you interpret what's happened. So there's a really huge background behind that story. This is actually the most personal novel that I've ever written, because I too discovered in my early 30s that I was adopted.
Oh, wow.
So I've been on this and there's a lot that I won't talk about publicly yet, because there's some things, that have come into my life that are positive things now, but I just don't want to, get into them. But I can get into like sort of like the basics of, kind of, I think anybody thinks at a certain point in their life in their early 30s that you probably know everything there is to know about yourself, so having something like that, learning something like that really does a number on you, so it's been this really weird, often dark journey where I would think of, what would have happened had I not been adopted? Because the reality of it is being adopted is a positive thing. It's a beautiful thing, because somebody has chosen to take you into their life and raise you as their child and love you. So there's to me, there's nothing negative about actually being adopted.
No, you were chosen. There's no fortune in it. It's just someone said, "You're mine. I want you."
Right, but there was a stigma about it back in the day. I don't know why. I'll never understand why. So the adoptions used to be closed, and there was this whole thing, and just the whole family secret idea of it. It's very weird to me. I don't understand it. I never understand it. Things are different now.
Yeah,
and I think there's going to be a lot less and less late discovery adoptees happening, in the future, and I think that's good, because it's a very strange thing to find out. But I started thinking about things like, what if I had been raised differently with a different family, or, my biological family, or, just thinking, the different sort of things that I could have been. And it sort of terrified me to think that I could have become a completely different person than I am.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have had the same circle of friends. I wouldn't have had the same experiences. I wouldn't have necessarily got into skateboarding, gotten into punk rock. Who knows what I would have gotten into.
Nature versus nurture.
Exactly. So that whole thing, and I always had this really weird, irrational, paranoid fear about doppelgangers. Like, just thinking, what if there was somebody out there who looks exactly like you, who's trying to ruin your life? Because it's just like, I don't know, it's very irrational, but it's just one of those kind of things, that.
Well, it's a Germanic like folk tale for a reason. There is that irrational fear that's inherent to the human experience, and that's where the doppelganger found its rise.
Yeah. So I decided to combine those two ideas, because I felt it would be the perfect sort of idea for that. Just like, well, the doppelganger is the other possibility, and even though that other possibility is supposed to be the bad guy, again, it kind of comes back to, like, I always want to make sure my antagonists have reasons for what they do, and they're, it's something you've probably heard people talk about. The person who's the villain in the story doesn't think they're the villain. No, and he definitely doesn't. So it's sort of one of those things. It's just it's been a really difficult book to develop. It went through a lot of different versions. It started off as a poem. It developed into a short story. Then I ended up writing a feature-length screenplay out of it. It wasn't very good. It wasn't very good at all. It was my first attempt at a screenplay, and it wasn't very good. But what it did help with was kind of creating a template for an eventual novel. And what it is now doesn't even resemble what it started out as many years ago. It's just been sitting with me. I'll put it away for a long time, because it just gets too close, and I have to put it away and work on something else. So it's actually been with me. The story has been with me since before Secrets of the Weird, even.
Oh, wow.
Just because of how long ago I found out, that was 12, 13 years ago. No. Yeah, about 13 years ago that I found that out. And so it's just, I don't know. It's hard to talk about it. It's not that I don't want to talk about it, but it's just a weird thing to talk about, because it's not like most people's everyday experiences. And it's hard for people to relate to it, because even if somebody was adopted, if they knew their whole life they were adopted, it's a different thing that they're dealing with than somebody like me is dealing with.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend that I grew up with, Brandon, and his parents are Dutch, Pennsylvania Dutch, and he is dark complected, and he came to realize that he was, adopted and is Mexican American by blood, but raised in the Pennsylvania Dutch country of where we're from, you know, and it turned out really well for him just because his parents were cool with him going to meet them in Arizona and the like. But I can, although it's not my experience, I can relate to what you're saying, just predicated on the experiences of my friend.
Yeah.
You know, and especially being that he was obviously not fully Caucasian.
Yeah.
You know,
that's been a thing with my journey too, because of growing up, you know, my whole life people will be like, are you half Hispanic? Are you like part Native American? And I'll be like, no. Like, and again, there's still more to this story because, you know, I've learned a little bit more about, you know, that now, but there's still more that I'm finding out and that I will be finding out because there's more to the story. Let's just say there's more to the story than what I thought. So, yeah, it's kind of a wild ride. And so that's what inspired that particular story. But it made me think of that when you mentioned that earlier. Just the whole, again, it's the whole nature versus nurture thing. Is just like you could have been raised in a completely different environment, a completely different person, and to me, that's just terrifying. And that's an existential horror sort of thing. It's just like, are you always destined to be the person you're supposed to be, or is it a chance? You know, I mean, it's just really like a flip of a coin. If I'd been raised by another family,
I think that's 50% of it. 50% of it is where you're raised, who you're raised by, the environment. The other half is your inherent blood nature.
Yeah.
And I mean, that may very well be the dichotomy of every human being, because we're always at war with ourselves to some degree or another. You know, our the angels of our better nature trying to best the demons of our lesser nature. But, you know, I would have to think there at some point you looked at yourself and you were like, fuck, why am I so handsome and no one else in my family is, or something like that?
Well, of course not that. No, but it was like a lot of things would happen. Like, you don't look like your brother or something like that. It's not like we looked so dissimilar, but we didn't look that similar. I mean, it was more a stylistically similar thing. You know, like he was my younger brother and we both got into the same things. We were both into horror movies, both into punk, and, you know, we just kind of dressed similarly. So we just didn't, you know, it was kind of one of those things. But if you actually look at our features, we don't look alike. So it's just
me with my siblings. It just so happens that we are genetically.
Yeah. And that happens too. That totally happens too. So you just never know. There's no way to really know. And I you know, I didn't think anything of it. Like, I didn't think of it.
Nor should you. I mean, my
life like that, like I did.
My youngest brother looks nothing like me, skin tone wise, hair color wise. I'm a blue-eyed, blonde-haired guy.
Yeah.
He has dark hair and like cat green eyes, and my brother Gavin has red hair and brown eyes. None of us look alike. We're all brothers. We're all genetically similar. There's no adoption because my parents are Irish Catholics and just, you know, kept making babies.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's no reason to question it, really, if you think about it. But how did you finally come to the realization that, okay, this is how this went down?
My dad told me.
He just came out with it.
Yeah, well, yeah. He took me. You know, we got together one day, just the two of us, and he said he wanted to talk about something, and he told me. He always wanted to tell me. My mom, I guess, didn't want to tell me.
Yeah, for
her own reasons. And it was just like a bomb dropped. And it's just been a really wild ride ever since. And it's like I was saying, again, without getting into the specifics, it's gotten very wild very recently. Just leave it at that. I know that's like such a like mean
it's
thing
oblique, yeah.
To say that and not give you the details, but it's just I just don't want to talk about it yet.
No, I get it. And you know, there is a testament to parental love in all of that too.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of makes your adoptive parents look pretty great.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I mean, they're you know, I know they care about me. I'm totally happy that I was raised by the family I was raised. You know, Like, I mean, my parents have been divorced since I was like 12, but like still, you know, everything that has come in the wake of who I was chosen by has been because of that. You know, every moment, you know, every little thing that happens, any step you take, you know, you go right, you go left, that's going to change the course of your life in some way, however small. So it's like,
it's choose your own adventure book, like when we were kids.
Essentially. So so using all that in the book, I just kind of wanted to see how something like that would impact somebody who already has a history of mental illness, and how they would go into even more of a downward spiral, and you know, throw in the whole possible supernatural element of it, and make it a horror book. So,
which is all equally as real too, because if you ask me, there are supernatural elements within the context of human reality.
Yeah,
totally real. Nobody wants to admit it, but I've seen some
shit in my life that I can't explain. So you know.
Oh, I grew up in a house that you can't explain logically otherwise, but you know. My friend Tara from the band Lycia. I don't know if you remember they're
okay. Yeah. They're on a project, right?
Yeah, they're a project band. They're the two of them. They're a married couple, Mike and Tara, two of my best friends on earth. You know, between them and Pete Steele from Typo Negative, they were three of my favorite friends, personal friends of mine that affected my life. And the three of them knew my story intimately. And you know, I was on her podcast kind of talking about the house I'd grown up in. And, you know, these people know me really well for a really long time, and they know that I'm not completely fucking unhinged. But, but the house I'd grown up in was really, really fucked, to the point where the movies that you and I are talking about having grown up on kind of normalized my experience as a kid. So I think that all of this being supernatural, mental, psychological, whatever, I mean, it all has basis in reality, if that makes sense. So you're calling from experiences all human beings can have, because a lot of human beings do have spiritual, paranormal experiences, or experiences where they feel unhinged or where they feel less than sane.
Yeah.
And when you put that into the context of a fictional story and make it empathetic as you do, it begs a reader to invest.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that's an inherent gift that you have. That's why it kind of led me to believe that maybe you did have an experience or two with the ethereal, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had some weird things happen when I was younger. Not so much like as I've gotten older, and I don't know if that's just, you know, the various environments that I've been in, you know. But yeah, there were some weird things that I could never explain. Some of them were just things that were like seeing something out of the corner of your eye, like down the hallway, that you couldn't explain, but it looked like something, for lack of a better word, alive. You know?
Right.
or just, I don't know, like hearing things that didn't make sense, you know. But there could be explanations for these, you know, in some of them. I mean, I don't know. I don't have an explanation for the things that I've seen, or the things that have weirded me out. So I just always say, well, I don't pretend to know one way or the other. It's just like my belief in the afterlife. I don't know. I'm not going to know until I'm dead, or maybe I won't know because
it might just be like,
and I won't know.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Who knows? I don't, anything's possible, but I just don't like to pretend to know for sure without, you know, some sort of proof. So.
No, the only thing we can say with any degree of certainty is from the Einsteinian school of energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only harnessed or redistributed. So if a human being is inherently energy, which that's what drives the meat,
yeah,
you know, who knows where we end up?
Yeah.
And why should it even matter? Because the only thing that matters right now is now.
Yeah. You got to take that by the reins and do with it what you will.
Yeah. And what I find important in more so maybe Secrets of the Weird, but also in Sexy Leper, there's that spiritual core, that moral center to it all, where even though there's no happy ending to be had, or maybe a tidy bow to be tied up around it, there is that inherent maybe faith in humanity that's in there, even though there's darkness, even though there's that horror that's raining down on everyone. There is a faith in humanity that's buried within the narrative.
Certain parts of humanity, I guess.
Yeah.
I would argue, I guess, that it's sort of a bit of both. Faith in humanity, but also just complete distrust in humanity. In certain
I wouldn't call it distrust. I would call it realism. I would call it's realism.
Yeah.
But there's an inherent faith in it too, because there's a feminine anchor in both.
Yeah.
Yeah,
which is, I guess, an interesting choice for a cisgender male for his debut novel to write a transgender woman for his protagonist was, I guess, it was a move. It was a choice. Well, and then, second novel, right, from the cisgender woman's POV, it wasn't even like a calculated thing. It was just like, this is the right character for this book.
Yeah.
I think it was just like, I don't think, I guess as long as I'm doing my best to do justice to the character, I want to be able to write people who aren't necessarily the same as me, like I think it's the same as like acting in a way. I mean, I when I write my characters, it's sort of like method writing. I get into the heads of them, whoever they are, which can be a scary place with certain characters.
And I remember you mentioning that, like, your writing is method, which I find interesting, because I write as well, and within the context of my writing, I often employ a mirror and my own personal self and act out the scenes that I'm writing, or the narratives that I'm trying to espouse. Yeah. And I perform them for myself, in order to make them, give them corpus, make them alive, give them life. And that is inherently method, to the, I forget the method acting coach's name that most of the 70s actors that we all love went to. He's Russian, but that's the same method, and it's interesting that you can find yourself in that place, because most writers kind of put themselves in a tower away from everything and act as if they're maybe perhaps puppet masters.
Yeah.
But if you can inhabit it, I think that's when you get to the meat of everything, because you're at the ground level experiencing it with these characters that you're dreaming up.
That's exactly what I want to do. I mean, even though it can be hard to shake some of that off sometimes, if I really get in and find that core that I need to, which doesn't always happen, and when I do short stories, it doesn't happen as much because I don't have as much time to spend with the characters.
Right.
So I try to do as good of a job with that as I can in a short story, but like, there's just, if you're working with, 20 pages or something, it's, there's only so much you can do. So I kind of have to take a little bit of a different approach with that. But in a novel where you're going to be spending some time with some characters, I want to be able to really go deep and like, it's sort of like you're saying, some writers think of them as the puppeteer.
Yeah.
It's not really a form of puppeteer, but it's like you're kind of, it's like there's a meat puppet and I'm going to put myself into the meat puppet.
Yeah.
Actually make them do what they do with my own brain. but it's now their brain because I'm in their body. I don't know. That doesn't make sense. I don't know. I'm talking out of my ass right now. but it's something like that. I don't know. It's really hard to explain. It's sort of one of those things, like one of the most, and I'm sure you know this as being a fellow writer, you probably dread this question as much as anybody. Where do you get your ideas?
They get me. That's my answer.
Or how long did it take you to write this? I don't keep track. Like, maybe if you really want to know, it's going to be a sad number. I tell you what, because
it's probably about 10, 12 years. It's been festering and it keeps recurring. And then
years turning in my head because it's always being written in my head.
Yep.
You know, like, oh, what did you just say? Were you just talking to me? No, I was writing.
Are you really here?
Yeah. Oh, my wife gets so mad at me sometimes because I'm not paying attention. And like, oh, sorry, I was thinking of something in the story.
That's why I married a woman who's a filmmaker.
Oh, awesome.
By trade. Because at the very least, when we argue about my lack of presence sometimes, she at least understands to a degree that I'm inhabiting my own ether.
Yeah.
And she's like, all right, well, I expect at least an idea out of this. And then we begin to trade ideas. And my wife is this beautifully imaginative human being. So, I mean, for all of our similarities, there are just as many diametric oppositions.
Yeah.
But that's with all relationships. Yeah. But at least we have that. So.
Yeah, I love to use my wife as a sounding board for things that I could probably research myself. Like, it's usually things from a woman's perspective where I'm just like, okay, what would a woman do in this moment? You know, like, right. What would you do at the very least? You know, like, you know, because you're the most important woman in my life, so you're going to be like getting this information from most of the time. So, what would, even if it's something like stupid and small, like, or what is that thing called? You know, whatever. It's something that she would know that I wouldn't know. So she's always very helpful with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's easily the most important aspect of, being a masculine creative is having, if you are indeed cisgendered, to have that feminine foil to balance your creativity, because otherwise we're shooting in the dark pretty much. I mean, like as much as we like to think that we have a feminine side,
it's not the same. Yeah, it's not the same.
It's not the same.
It'll never be the same experiences, and as close as that, and one thing that she always tells me, getting back to the character of Trixie, she's always very proud of what I did with that character, and how she just doesn't understand how I got that close. Is probably she says, I guess, as close as I could get to getting into the head of a young trans woman without being one.
Yeah.
That would be the only thing that somebody could do better because they have that firsthand experience, and it's something that I couldn't have, that would be a different way of doing it. And without that knowledge, I can only do so much, I can do my best and do it with respect, but so she finds it very fascinating that I can get into that headspace as much as I can. And I'm just like, I guess it's just part research, part, I don't know if it's empathy. I mean, maybe so that plays into it a little bit, but
it's a willingness. It's a willingness to allow yourself to be empathetic.
Yeah.
As much as empathy plays a part, I mean, being raised, cisgendered men, we're going to have that disconnect from that, and you have to have a willingness to immerse yourself into the experience of someone who is diametrically opposed to what we were raised to be.
Yeah.
And that's important. That's very important. It's important not only to be a creative and to write a character like that, but to exist in the current world we're in right now, because you and I right now are at the age where we're the man.
Yeah.
We are the people that when you and I were 18 years old, looked at and were like, those Republican fucking pricks, those, like the people who didn't understand us when we were 17, 16, 18 years old. That's the age we're at right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter's 21. She's probably looking at me like, that fucking asshole doesn't know anything. But there's that piece that you have to kind of relinquish.
Yeah.
And I think you did that very, very willingly, very convincingly, and very organically in the situation of Trixie.
Cool. That's awesome. Thank you.
And I think it all harkens back to writing songs like Bundle of Sticks.
Yeah, and I guess that is sort of...
That's the through line.
It really... Because it was not written... It was a first-person song, essentially. But, but it was kind of taking on a different persona, in a sense. Which I guess I didn't really think of at the time. It wasn't a calculated thing. It was just like, this is how I want to do this, and I don't care what people think,
Yeah.
Yeah. They're going to think about what they think about me, and that's fine. So
yeah, and that was a dicey move in 1990, what, 7, 6?
So that song was written in 95.
95? Yeah.
We recorded it at the very end of 95.
Yeah, I mean, that's... Like I said, that's a very ballsy, very dicey move for the time period.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's obviously a through line.
Yeah,
in all reality.
Yeah, it's funny to think of that. I guess I never really thought about that myself, but
well, if you look at the body of your work, music and writing, it's a pretty basic through line, really.
Yeah.
But you're inhabiting your own, persona. Like, you're not looking at yourself with an objective point of view.
Fair enough.
So you're currently building up a new album, then, I'm guessing, right? That's what you'd said.
Oh, for Icepield?
Yeah.
Well, our first thing, we're going to do like a promo tape.
Mm-hmm.
That will have the song "The Glove" on it. It'll have one exclusive Icepield song and one cover song, and then we're doing a split LP. I don't want to necessarily for sure say the other band, even though I know who the other band is, but they haven't publicly announced it yet, so I don't want to say anything until they say, because I think that'd be rude.
Yeah.
But, the split LP will have 5 songs on it, one of which will also be "The Glove," and 4 other Icepield songs. So that's like our first sessions that we're pretty close to finishing. And then we're going to just start working on other stuff, I guess. So just see what it is. But that's exciting. So it's just cool that there's going to be something on the way. I mean, even though these days on the way means closer to a year when you finish. Yeah. When it's vinyl, at least. I mean, the tape will be able to have out in 3 months or something, probably, but so long compared to how it was like 10 years ago.
No, yeah, 10 years ago, like 3 months, and you can have everything pressed and ready to go through who was it, Pirates Press or something. But now everything is, like you can't even you could pre-order a T-shirt and wait 5 months for it. So we're probably not going to see anything written word-wise for you, at least within the next few months, I'm guessing. Then, huh?
Yeah, that's the only thing I have lined up right now. I'm trying to put together a short story collection and find a home for that, but that's difficult, without being, unless you're a big name for some reason, like a lot of presses don't seem to go for it, which to me, I just don't understand, because from my perspective, one of my favorite ways to find a new author is from a short story collection, because I can get a bunch of different things that they do and a different takes on things. And like, I don't know, I like that being my introduction to an author 9 times out of 10,
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at historically, from Stephen King to Clive Barker, those were the gateway drugs.
Yeah.
Essentially.
And it's like, at this point, I have enough, basically I wanted to do something that was, I don't know, 13, 14 stories, about 10 or 11 of them previously published, and a couple of new ones, be a good balance. So I don't know. I have it out with a couple of presses that actually are accepting short story collections. We'll see where that goes, but it's just something that's been a really hard sell for some reason. Like, it's just, but again, it's probably just got to find the right home for it. Just like with anything, with any of my books that I've done, you know, it's like once I had Gray Matter for Secrets of the Weird, which I had worked with them before on my, they actually bought what was my first professionally sold short story in their Splatterlands anthology. Mm-hmm. And so I already had a working relationship with them. And, you know, so once they had opened up for novels, I'm like, okay, yeah, I want to work with them again, you know?
Yeah.
And luckily that worked out. But yeah, it's weird. It's a weird game trying to get that short story thing going. I'm sure it'll happen eventually, but it's just like, okay, I have all these. I know that they have worth because somebody else bought them already. So yeah. You know, like it's not just like I'm just pulling these things, you know, out of nowhere. I'm like, oh, well, these are all my trunk stories, you know, like these are ones that like have been out there. There are, you know, like some of them didn't get around very much, unfortunately, but
right.
You know, that's small press for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like where the authors that we grew up lionizing were published in Playboy.
Yeah.
You know, Stephen King had small short stories published in publications like Playboy.
Yeah.
You know, back in the 70s. And it's not like that anymore. I mean, the written word is not consumed, unfortunately, as voraciously as it had been.
Yeah.
So finding the appropriate audience isn't at the mercy of what's put out in mass market as much. It's more niche oriented.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So
that's what good stuff is, though. You know.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I've discovered so many really awesome authors that, you know, are really big deals within the underground. I mean, obviously, you talk about Kath Koja earlier. You know, it's a perfect example.
Yeah,
she's a really big name, you know, in our universes.
Yeah,
but she's not a household name. You know.
No, but to me, she's
a writer.
she's a classic. She's a classic. Wrath James White is a classic.
You know,
but
Poppy Z. Bright or
Poppy Z. Bright. I mean, they made a TV show out of one of Poppy's series. You know?
Did they?
Yeah.
What show?
Oh my God, what is the name of it now? It's
I missed this.
They're two private detectives in Louisiana. Oh my gosh! And the one of the stars of it just passed away. He played Omar on The Wire.
No. You're thinking of. Oh, you're talking about Happen Leonard.
Happen Leonard, didn't she write
that was Lansdale.
That was Lansdale. That's right. I'm sorry. I thought Poppy wrote. No, Poppy wrote. Poppy wrote the stories about the restaurant. That's what I'm confusing with. The two gentlemen who were that they owned a restaurant or something like that. Also equally as good. But yeah, you're right. I'm terribly mistaken in that.
Yeah, it's a bummer that I mean, obviously, I mean, I guess Happen Leonard got canceled and he wouldn't have been able to continue anyways after the actor died. But because he was born to play that role, I mean, he was a perfect Leonard.
Yeah,
but Lansdale. He's getting to that point where I think he's not quite a household name, but he's up there. He's a really well respected, and I mean he's one of those guys that I will read anything he does, no matter what genre he's writing in, because it's always good.
But he started out in splatterpunk.
Yeah,
he was an original splatterpunk author.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the same league as, you know, your Clive Barkers. You know, was he not in the original splatterpunk collection, if I'm not mistaken?
I have those somewhere, so I can check. But he probably was in at least one of them, probably the first one. But
I think the first one, if I'm not mistaken. But Poppy as well, like the first few Poppy Z. Bright novels, you're talking about some very, very heady, very guttural
so upset that she wrote that stuff. It's such, well, I should say he, because he's transitioned. Sorry.
Yeah. We're not dead naming though, because Poppy's Poppy.
Yeah, but so young.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like those early short stories and the first couple of novels, I'm just like, that's not fair. You started to be that good at that age. Like for the most part, I think this goes for, at least 3/4, if not more, of writers. You're really worth your salt until you're in your 30s.
Yeah.
But you get those rarities like Bobby C. Bright. That just, 18 you're writing, great. Okay, thanks. Makes me look bad. Jerk. But yeah, one of my favorites for sure. Big influence.
But in the same token, Poppy Z. Bright, there's that very, very strong, thrust in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and then it kind of winds out, and there aren't those same, there's not that same intensity. So he could still be writing with the same talent.
Yeah.
But the veracity just probably isn't there anymore because the content isn't as immediate and intense and visceral.
Yeah. I mean, that same sort of thing happened with Barker too.
Yeah. I mean,
the thing is visceral is the Books of Blood. It's just
no, it's not.
I can follow that up on that same level. It's just.
I wanted to love Mr. Be Gone as much as I loved his earlier work, but
I did like that one, but it's not my favorite by any means. But I did like that one.
No, and Scarlet Gospels, I really like. I got the signed copy of it. I really wanted this to be like biblical to me.
I know that one was kind of not.
It disappointed just because people don't realize he was very ill.
Yeah.
And he was getting ripped off by his lover at the time. There was a lot going on.
There's like a hugely longer version of that too that just got edited down so much that maybe it would have been if it had been with the 600 pages or whatever it's supposed to be.
Especially when you consider everyone that was figured so heavily into it, because Harry's involved in it, and that brings to mind the Books of the Art, which we're still waiting for the third one of, and I've been waiting for that since
a long time ago.
back then, but that when it doesn't happen, you just kind of have to move on. And when you take into consideration where's Kath right now? Koja's not really doing anything. And Poppy isn't making the next extreme novel. So all eyes, in my opinion, kind of go your way, because you're what I've got right now. So you're taking up that helm. It's your turn. It's your turn now.
I'll take it. I mean,
you're in.
You want to give me that turn? I'll take it.
You're in that milieu. You're writing at that level, and you haven't had a miss yet.
Well,
so it's on you, brother.
You haven't read my short stories yet, so you don't know if I have this. I will say, you want to check out one of my most bonkers short stories. Read that one in that Splatterlands anthology.
I intend to,
because that was their sort of attempt to sort of revitalize the splatterpunk genre.
Oh, nice.
And I went into a really weird. I made a very weird choice for my story. I don't even want to tell you about it, just because it's better if you just go read it and go, well, what the fuck is this?
Just going blind.
What is happening here?
In my opinion, Sexy Leper has it has echoes of the classic splatterpunk without the nihilism.
Yeah.
I mean, which is weird to say, because I think those who are uninitiated in the horror genre would read that and find a lot of nihilism in it, but I don't find it to be terribly nihilistic.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's not. There's a lot of humanity in it. There's a lot of hope in it, even though it doesn't end particularly well.
No, there's hope that it goes very astray.
Yeah.
It gets very tarnished.
But there's
the original Splatterpunks. I mean, they were. I mean, I would say those are like as a collective. That's sort of my biggest influences. I mean, that's the stuff like one of the. Have you ever read the Hot Blood series?
Yeah.
I mean, that stuff was instrumental. When I think I got like the second one first, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. And in that, I think if it's either the second one or the third one, but it's got that Bentley Little story, Llama.
Yeah. Yep.
And that is, oh, thank you. Got some extra beverage here.
Nice.
It's a mocktail, I think. But yeah, that Bentley Little story, Llama, just blew my mind. I was like, this, you could do this in a short story. Okay. But like, yeah, the Hot Blood stuff, again, much like with Clive Barker, the eroticism and the carnality of all that stuff really did a number on me. It's just like, because he just didn't, I don't know, like with Stephen King, you didn't get as much of that, you know?
No, you didn't get that whiff of sex.
Yeah, you had some of it going on, but it wasn't on that level where it really got to the carnal being that Barker did and the writers in the Hot Blood series did. And I was just like, yeah, okay, that appeals to me. I like that direction. I wanted, you know, I didn't think at the time because I wasn't thinking of myself as ever being a writer at the time. But like once I realized much later in life that that's what I wanted to do, I kind of went back to that. It's like that's the stuff that I really loved reading that really got to me. That's how I want to steer most of myself. Not all of it, obviously, but like a very large portion of it is very, very inspired by that series, and you know, it makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, you had to have been pretty young when you realized that you wanted to be a writer, though, correct?
Mm-mm.
No,
nope, no, not at all. I didn't. I It's weird. It's weird thinking about that because I guess I just thought it was for people like Stephen King who are already these big name people. It's they get to do that. I don't get to do that. You know, I didn't think about taking it into my own hands. And then I got so involved in music, which of course, being in bands and writing lyrics, I was writing, obviously. And I dabbled in just short stories for fun. I would take a creative writing class as like an elective or something, and I would write stories for fun, but not with the intention of ever sharing them beyond either myself or the class I was in. It wasn't ever like, oh, I want to be a writer. I just didn't think of it that way. But in retrospect, it is obvious that I had just like I just had that one person that gave me that encouragement. Oh, you should actually like maybe take this seriously. Maybe I would have started pursuing it younger, but I didn't actually really think about it until my 30s. Because so after high school, I went to community college for a couple of years and was just aimless, which was weird because all throughout high school, I was a total school nerd. Like, people would look at me, I'm just a skate punk kid. You know, they would think I was like an F student, but I was like a straight A student. I didn't miss a day of school. I loved learning. And then, when it got to going to community college, I didn't know what I wanted. I was just like, it was completely aimless. I'm like, I'm just screwing around here. I don't know what I do. I'm just going to stop. Everything I want to do right now is music involved, and we'll just see what happens. So down the line, then a couple years later, I started working at Tower Records. I'm working there for years and years and years. But I knew that at some point that I wasn't going to work there forever, and obviously that was proven true regardless of if I was moving on or not, since it doesn't exist anymore. But I was like, I need to figure something else out. So I'm going to go back to school. Went back to community college to get my associate's degree, transferred to San Diego State. I was on the track, as an English major, probably to go into teaching. I'm like, well, that seems like the obvious choice.
Yeah.
If I'm an English major, that makes sense.
Yep.
That's what I'm going to do. But it got to a point where my wife noticed, your heart's not in this. This is not what you want to do. You're doing this because you think you're supposed to do this. And I had, again, taken some creative writing classes for electives, just had fun with them. And the professor of one of those classes really, really liked the stuff that I was doing. He thought it was really different from what he'd seen before. One of those was a very early short story version of Secrets of the Weird. It was essentially like the first couple chapters in a short story form. And he's just like, if you ever want to like take this seriously, maybe go to grad school, like talk to me, I'll write your recommendation. I was like, oh no, that's not for me. I don't know. I'm just, thank you, but whatever. But anyways, I guess my wife saw something about what I wanted that I didn't realize I wanted. And she's like, you should do this, to get your master's in creative writing, pursue that. And so kind of last minute, I just like applied for the MFA program and did all that and went into that. So it was really just sort of kind of a chance thing that I didn't even realize I wanted until it was kind of slapped into my face. And I think that's a different path from the average writer. I think most writers kind of know from a pretty young age that's what they want to do, and they work at it for a long, long time. I didn't, but I should have. I feel kind of dumb not realizing that, because again, like I say, I always was writing. I always took a very, huge pride in the lyrics that I wrote, and I loved it when I got feedback that was positive. That people always said they really liked my lyrics. I was like, oh, that made me feel so good because I put a lot of heart into that. That's so important to me to write something that means something. Yeah. So I should have known, but I just didn't. I was just.
But those writers, these same writers that we speak of, that knew from a really young age, someone informed them.
Yeah.
Taking myself as an example, 8th grade. When I was in 6th grade, we were given Walden to read and report upon, and Thoreau really bit me. Especially civil disobedience as the young punk that I was.
Yeah.
And it really enthralled me. And from there on, I had begun to write poetry and short stories. And by the time I had gotten to 8th grade, I was in accelerated classes back then. So we had not an English teacher, but a literature teacher in 8th grade. And she told me straight up, like, you have a gift. You have a gift for a turn of phrase and a scope for character creation and world building. So that was what put the boot into my ass.
Yeah.
It took someone outside of, my family situation or my friend base, someone who I looked up to, someone who held a position of power, to say, you have this, so do something with it. So that's more than likely why it took you until your wife said,
yeah,
this isn't what,
Yeah.
It takes that human being that you put on that pedestal and has that power to say, this is what you really are. Yeah. To hold that mirror in front of you. So it's legitimately the same thing that I experienced in 8th grade, but you did something with it, and I'm still a plumber. And I have a degree in English literature. And I'm a plumber, so.
Hey, we need plumbers. Plumbers are a wonderful thing.
Yeah, they are, but it's not scratching my creative itch at all.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I have my day job too. And
sure.
That's thankfully I'm using my degree for that. So it wasn't just like all I was doing was getting a degree just to do small press books or something.
Well, yeah, I'm supposed to be a teacher right now, but I decided I didn't have the patience for it because at the time I didn't like kids, and I'm a father of 2 now. So what the fuck? But I don't like kids. I can't be a teacher. And now it's like, why the fuck am I not a teacher? I love kids.
Yeah. You just weren't in the right headspace, I guess.
No, I was the son of a plumber. That's what it came down to.
Yeah. And I wasn't, at the same time, maybe I wasn't even ready to do what I would do now when I was in my 20s or earlier anyways. I don't think I had the skills that I had. I definitely wrote things, but I didn't think about them as deeply as I do now. You know, I just kind of wrote it, and I didn't care about the way the prose sounded as much, you know, like I do now, or just, I don't know. There's just so many factors, you know, that just, some of us are later bloomers than others.
It's a discipline. I think it's more of a discipline thing and less of a creativity thing.
Yeah. And that's what I got out of the MFA program that I wouldn't have had otherwise, was the discipline. It really got me ass in chair, and really got me thinking more about how I want my language to sound. Because to me, I think, you know, the way a book is written is just as important as the story itself.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't want to get, you know, too purple prosy, obviously.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, which is what I said about you. Actually, your prose is not too purple.
Yeah.
You don't devolve into exploitation, although you do expose, you know, a darker side, a more seedy lifestyle. Yeah. The prose, it's taking something like Last House on the Left versus, you know, something with a lot less exploitation in it to get to the same point of this person's been raped and they're going for revenge.
Yeah.
You're not glorifying the act that, you know, drives the revenge forward. You're painting the picture, but the revenge is the you know, that's the linchpin of the story. So that's what you're concentrating on. So no, your prose is far from purple.
Yeah. And I think that was, you know, something it came pretty naturally. I had to work on it a little bit, obviously, like anybody would, but I think it just came, I think just being somebody who wrote lyrically, you know, for so many years, that I had that style kind of just naturally come to me to write prose with the same mindset as I would write a song, but, you know, in prose form, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But not get it, you know, again, not too purple, not too flowery, but have that flair and have that style too, because I don't want it to just be straightforward. I mean, that's fine, I guess, but, you know, there's certain go-to authors. Again, referencing somebody like Bentley Little, most of his stuff is very straightforward, but his stories are so bonkers. That's why I enjoy them.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Like, and he's kind of my go-to for that sort of, I guess, popcorn fiction, you know, where it's like, yeah, you know, his writing is, I go to it for the content because it's insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't go to it for a stylistic thing, you know, that I have plenty of other authors I can read for that, you know, but sometimes I just want popcorn.
Yeah.
And that's Bentley Little, and he does it well. You know?
Yeah, he's like he's a darker like Robert Heinlein. Like Heinlein always delivered on the popcorn too. So, you know, somebody like that you can count on to kind of take you to a different world in a very direct manner. Whereas somebody like a Barker, there's something a bit more lyrical.
Yeah, there's layers on layers, and it's the dark fantastique. You know, like it's
the fantastique. Yeah.
There's an artistry. You know, it's just sort of I don't. Sometimes I feel like when I talk about this stuff, it comes off as very pretentious, you know. Because here's one of the things that I would talk about sometimes when I first did some reading signing appearances for Secrets of the Weird. One of the things I thought about, I felt so weird and pretentious talking about this because one of the ways that I came up with, I'm not really an outliner. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm more of a pantser, but sometimes I do, you know, have notes and stuff, you know, that form sort of a loose, almost outline thing. But I know I have some writer friends that are very strict outliners, and some that are just complete pantsers. You know, I definitely lean more pantser. Mm-hmm. For those listeners out there who don't know what that is, that means just kind of writing off the cuff. You know, like just letting your pants where it goes. You know, see your pants. But the Secrets of the Weird, my quote unquote outline was I wrote poems about each of the main characters that formed their characters. Some of them I wrote like that. I even did like formed poetry where I shaped them like the characters. Like the Withering Wilds poem was a very thin line thing. The one that was Dr. Cass had a middle section that kind of came out thicker, and I got a sort of a visual picture of him doing that way. But I wrote all these character bits in poetry about the characters. And as soon as I did that, because I did that in my MFA program, we had to take some poetry classes too, which I was fine because I was always a poet also.
Yeah.
And even one of the poetry professors was trying to pull me over to the poetry side. Said, why don't you come over to us instead of fiction? I'm like, no, I like doing this. I like dabbling in this. I like writing poetry, but I'm definitely more of a fiction guy. But so I did that as my final project, was this poetry sequence. There was all these characters, and it was that after I did that, I had the novel. It was just like it all poured out of me. But people were like, what, that's really weird. How did you do that? Like, I've never heard of anybody else doing that. It just doesn't make sense. But that's what worked for me for that book. You know, it just, but I just felt so pretentious talking about that. Like, this, it's just like,
I don't see
the artist. You know, I'm a poet. You know.
I don't read the pretense in it just because I come from the same academic background as well. And I've experienced, like, my roommate in college, he is currently the poet laureate of the school we'd gone to.
Oh, wow.
And he is so up his own fucking ass. It's absolutely painful. And, you know, I loved the guy when we were younger. We used to do the spoken word poetry thing, like, and I was still playing in hardcore bands, but you know, he was just so, like, and still is, and he's my age, 45, and he still does these spoken word poetry shows where he literally thinks he's Bruce Dickinson in Iron Maiden, like foot up on the monitor, like, just like just feeling himself. And, you know, it's all just this broken-hearted crybaby, like, poetry about the girl who fucked him over in 1992. And the poetry is fantastic. It's well rendered, and it's well performed when he does it, but it's legitimately the same song.
Yeah. It hasn't moved out of
therein lies the pretense.
Oh, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't read pretense in what you're doing, because there's a forward motion. There's a kinetic energy.
Well, yeah, you gotta keep challenging yourself as an artist. You know, whatever you're doing. You know, whether it's music or prose or whatever. It's just like, you don't want to repeat the same damn thing over and over. That's just, it makes everything stale. I can't imagine. I don't understand why anybody would want to do that.
Right.
Like, I mean, I've done bands that sound somewhat similar to one another, but there was enough difference in it that, you know, it was worth doing. And then I've done a complete turn, you know, that's sounded like you wouldn't, if you didn't know me personally, you wouldn't realize it was the same guy singing in those bands. You know, like, I like that chameleon aspect, I guess. Yeah. I think some like, sometimes, you know, musicians, singers or whatever, they're very consistent, and that's fine too. You know, they have a very consistent sound and they stick with it, but they still progress within that. And you can kind of, you know what quality you're going to expect, even if they don't deliver the same exact thing every time. And that's cool. Yeah. For me, I've always wanted to do all kinds of different things, you know, because I like so many different kinds of things that I'm like, I want to try this. And if I can't do it, oh, well, I tried. Yeah. But, you know, and it's the same thing with fiction. You know, I want to, like, keep the basics of what I'm doing, but try different things. That's, I think, why with the new book, Serving Holes, you know, it definitely leans a little more psychological thriller than anything I've ever done before. And if anything, it might be, well, I don't know. I don't know if it'll end up being accessible, but a little bit more accessible, because I would hesitate to use mainstream for sure, but like accessible to a more wider readership, I think, because it's less niche. Right. But it's still me at the same time. So I don't know, it's still got that weird element to it that I can't ever shake, because that's just naturally who I am. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I want to be. You know, there's some strangeness going on here. You know, it's not, you know, just your basic thing here, but yeah, I don't know. I think I think it's important as artists of anything you're doing, just to try different things and fall flat on your face or succeed. Just see what happens. You're never going to know.
Well, yeah, because the journey is just as important as the end product.
Yeah,
that's the exercise, and that's the life within the story itself. I mean, and getting there. It's all about getting there.
No, that doesn't mean you're going to be expecting to see me writing a rom-com anytime soon.
Well, but to be fair, there's romantic comedy in both novels.
Sure, it's an element. I mean, it's
in
different type of romantic comedy.
But in Sexy Leopard, there's a very failed comedic romance in the wings.
Oh yeah.
I mean
it's a dark comedy for sure. I mean, I think of Sexy Leopard almost more. It's a horror book for sure, but I think of it more as a dark comedy than anything.
It is a dark comedy. It's a jet black comedy.
Yeah, it's full on gallows humor.
Yeah. Twisting on a gibbet, just waiting.
My favorite little moment in that book is something that just came off the cuff, and I left it in there because when I wrote it, I just started giggling so much. And it's that moment when I can't even remember my own character's name sometimes because I haven't looked at that manuscript in so long. But it's the guy. It's when he becomes Grady.
Oh yeah, not Lucas. Is it Lucas?
Maybe, or is Lucas the other one? If they're brothers.
No, the brother is Carrie.
Okay, yeah, Carrie's brother. So it's Lucas becomes Grady, the serial killer.
Grady Sullivan, yeah.
And it's when he meets up with the transformed version of Carrie.
Yeah, in the bar.
And he's giving a fake name to Carrie based on his two favorite, killers from movies. He goes, "Oh, hi, I'm
Jason Bateman."
And I'm like, "Oh, I'm leaving that in."
Jason Voorhees and Patrick Bateman.
I was like, there's no way I can't keep that. He still cracks me up to this day, and I'm just like, oh, I hope somebody laughs as much when I read that as I did when I wrote that.
I did. I was like, holy shit.
Just there's moments like that I just love, and I feel so proud of myself when I write them down. There's a moment in Secrets of the Weird that is it's a moment when Trixie runs into the Zane brothers, and I'm probably going to paraphrase this a little bit, because I don't have the book in front of me, but it's something like where one of the Zane brothers raises his hand as if he was saying, "Stop in the name of love." It's written so much better than I'm saying it right now. The comic timing of it. I remember Tony, my editor, his note was just "ha." Like, okay, that one landed well. We're keeping that one.
That whole Grady Sullivan arc, like, you're looking at, like, it's entertaining to read, even though he's so deplorable. Like he kills a baby. He eats a mermaid alive.
I guess it's a baby. I mean, it is a baby, but it isn't a baby.
It isn't a baby. And then goes on to fuck his brother, who's his sister. No.
I'm like, I had to go to every dark place I could go. Like, how much can I push this?
It went far. I mean, it wasn't like a Serbian film far, but it was pretty fucking far.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think he said something sort of like this earlier, but it's not just like extreme for extreme's sake. Like certain as you call it, as they're called, torture porn movies or something like that.
Yeah.
That's just not my bag. I wanted to go to an extreme with a purpose, with to sort of make a point in some way. Sometimes what that point may be is not the clearest, but there's a point somewhere hiding in there.
Well, I mean, to me, anyway, what you were painting was a picture of someone who's this young Republican conservative who gets free reign basically to become his own id. Via, this character that he associated himself with in the movies, like a Jason Voorhees type character, this unstoppable serial killer with no moral compass that, it was already in him, but he was afraid to outwardly live.
Yeah.
So he's given license to via this curse that's put upon everyone at the party who got a costume from Cosmos.
Yeah.
And, he takes it to an illogical extreme that's logical only to his own warped psyche.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself lends itself to not being torture porn, but his existential character arc, because this is who he kind of always wanted to be anyway.
Yeah, that's a pretty spot on take, I'd say.
I thought so, but I over intellectualize everything.
Well, I like that. I mean, that's the kind of, I like both kinds of readers. I mean, some readers will just take it for what it is, and that's fine. That's there, but I really, really enjoy when people really get the little things that I put in, just the little details. And sometimes it's something like, especially obviously in Seekers of the Weird, there's a lot of, punk stuff in there that some people aren't going to get, but there's little character bits that only, a handful of people are going to get, but those bonus things, when somebody sees that, they're going to have a very extra idea of who this character is. They're going to know, oh, I know who that guy is.
Well,
so it's like, but it's just kind of a bonus thing. It's like, it's not essential for everybody to get that, but those that do are going to be like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing here.
In Secrets of the Weird, there are actually like hardcore scene luminaries that I could pick out in the characters, like people that you and I know, but not everyone else is obviously going to know who's like, he's talking about that guy from that band, huh? Yeah. And like, I won't say it because, I still have associations with some of the people that I suspect may very well be the people we're talking about.
I'm so curious where you think these are.
But, like, it's all in there and it's all in the subtext.
Or having something like the fake fanzine interview with the civilized cannibals in it. Like, that was something that I thought was a really cool bonus thing. It's not essential to the story, but it's sort of like you're getting a little bit of extra depth into these characters by taking it out of the story for that brief visual moment, which is kind of what I want to do with all those visual elements in the book. I think it was a risk to do that. I think, especially with the first novel. You don't know anything about me. You read my book. What are these weird little divergents? These little commercials that are happening suddenly, and these other little visual items that are going on throughout the book. And I thought that was just so much fun. And it's not for everybody. Some people that's the only thing they don't like about the book. Some people absolutely love those moments because they're just so different from what they see in a normal book. But it for me, I put them in there because it gives you a more well-rounded view of that universe, even if it's not, those moments aren't essential to the plot or whatever.
No, but
you get a little bit more information about Sweetville. You get a little bit more information about these characters and their motivations, but in a different way than just telling it through prose.
Well, it makes Sweetville more palpable. It's more of a real place because we can all, once having seen all of the minutia, it becomes more realistic. It becomes more tactile.
And it was probably sort of a subconscious, like, Watchmen influence.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, that was a thing that Alan Moore did in the comic series. So.
With the Black Mariner and...
Yeah, just all that stuff, all the little newspaper articles and things like that. And, it wasn't a conscious thing, but I realized looking back, oh, that's probably what caused that.
Yeah.
I think Grant Morrison has done some stuff like that too. So, and again, comics just as influential on my prose as film,
Well, especially when you're talking about people like Grant Morrison and, even my guy, Neil Gaiman, like there's that, or Gaiman.
Sandman's a big one for me.
Yeah. I mean, the Sandman series, just there's such maniacal and visceral moments like contained therein, like they're like serial killer conventions where child molesters are giving dissertations in front of people, like that only in DC Vertigo could something like that have happened. And in the same turn, the Watchmen can only have happened in the DC universe as well, because like, come on, was Marvel going to do that?
No, definitely not.
They were all capes, cowls, and bright colors, until kitchen sink presses, like, when Spawn came about and the like in the mid 90s. Yeah. Before that, DC they were the only ones taking chances, and then you got your Dark Horse and Cerebus and all of the good stuff.
Yeah. I would say my biggest comic influences, the number one would be Sam Keith.
Yeah.
Like The Max is my all-time favorite comic book.
Oh, so good.
I eat up everything he does. I think, and let me tell you, I don't know if you've ever met him in person, but he's one of the sweetest people you'll ever meet if you ever do. He's an amazingly sweet man.
I could say that about Clive Barker, because I got to meet him at a Fangoria Weekend of Horrors, and what a guy.
Yeah. But Sam Keith, one of the things that really inspired me about him is the way he writes women. Mm-hmm. He writes real women characters. It was such a different thing from, seeing all the superhero comics. Not that certain writers didn't give depth to the women characters, but you see such a one-sided thing of these women who are all perfect bodies, all this thing. And here he is drawing and writing women who look and act like normal women. And it was like, that was huge. It was like, oh, okay. And segueing to that, my other big influence, and they also do this very well, are the Hernandez brothers with Love and Rockets.
Oh yeah.
But their whole way of telling stories was, a lot of people, I don't think have ever caught this, but it was very, very, very influential on Seekers of the Weird, because of the way they tell stories is not plot driven, it's character driven. It's these not quite vignettes, but they have these just little splashes of these characters, and that's what makes up the plot, is their lives and what they're doing. And it's not just this one through line necessarily, although stuff does pop up, here and there throughout the years of their comics. There are little moments that seem like through lines and stuff, but it's just like, when I read those comics, I'm like, oh, you can do that. You can do that. Okay.
Yeah, because it's inherently tangential.
Yeah. I'm like, all right, okay. And like, of course, them having that punk background too, made sense. Yeah. It's a little more evident in Jaime's work than Beto's, but I mean, they both came from that world. So it's just that stuff was huge for me,
Yeah, they also took a lot of cues from Peter Bagg and people like that, like just writing from a less hero driven and more, like commonplace setting for the dementia to take root.
Yeah. Yeah, and even though I grew up with all the Marvel and DC stuff, I mean, I was definitely more of an X-Men guy, just because I liked the element. It was probably the closest thing to horror, because they had some horror stuff in there sometimes.
Yeah, especially when Excalibur happened.
Yeah. So there was stuff like that. I always appealed to that, and of course, the darker Batman stuff. For going to go DC, I was always attracted to that. I mean, you need that dark Batman stuff, and Swamp Thing, Swamp Thing,
Hellblazer, Sandman. Those are like my holy trinity.
So yeah, that's all classic stuff, So when I gravitated away from the superhero stuff was, I think, when that stuff started coming around, and then when the Image came out, and then you had the Max, and it's like that was kind of almost marketed as a superhero book, but it certainly wasn't.
No. When Image happened, when the Max and Spawn started to really hit, I mean, it was a logical conclusion to the darkest aspects of Wolverine and the darkest aspects of Batman.
Yeah.
And you take those two and graduate them into a universe and a comic book company that didn't have the same comic book code limitations because they just didn't care. Same thing with Dark Horse. Dark Horse just didn't care.
Yeah.
And they set it loose. I mean, Hellboy is the same thing for me as Spawn and the Max. There were no limitations. It was character driven and dark and horror and existentialism. Like there was as much Kafka as there was Stephen King in it. It all ran wild.
Balance. Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned Wolverine, and it makes me think of something funny that is an honest answer, but I love to like get Marvel Universe purists up in a tiff about this with the Marvel films and stuff. Because I'm not super into them. Some of them are fine. But I'm just not general. But I always get people upset and say my favorite Marvel film is Logan.
Mine too, because
they get so mad because it's not an official Marvel Universe.
But it kind of is, because it's Old Man Logan. The comic book series Old Man Logan is a very loose inspiration for that movie. Yeah. Although the events are vastly dissimilar.
Yeah. But people get mad about it because it's not like, it's not owned by the Marvel film universe, and so I'm just, it still comes from Marvel. So that's why it's an honest answer for me. But
the same thing with Joaquin Phoenix Joker film is easily in my top 3 favorite Batman movies ever, and Batman's not even in the fucking thing.
Yeah,
it's that good in my opinion, but that's because it's a character piece. It's a well-crafted drama, and it's really demented.
Yeah, for sure.
And the most human Marvel film ever made is Logan.
Yeah,
by a vast country mile.
It is such an emotional core, and it's again so dark, which obviously both of us are attracted to. So it's like that's like everything I want out of a comic book movie. It's like
I cried.
It's that when you get to that end, it's just like, okay.
I openly wept like a child.
Oh, totally. And I wouldn't. I don't care. Like when the stuff happened in the Avengers movies and everybody died and half the people died. I don't care.
It's a cartoon. It's candy. But like they came out with what they do, a black and white version of the Logan film, just to try and, which is great or whatever. But why even mess with perfection? When that came out, that was the most human. It was the most human story that had ever transpired from that wheelhouse of films.
Yeah. It's just I want more of that, and I just haven't been delivered that yet. And it's upsetting. I do like some of the TV series. I thought like the Daredevil series was really good.
Oh yeah,
the Punisher and stuff. I think the reason for that is because you're getting so much more long form. And you get in those movies, you get 2.5 hours. You don't really get to know anybody. You get 10 episodes of a TV show. Oh, you have time to get to know these characters, and there's more at stake. And I think that's why largely they're better. Now, it doesn't work out always. Iron Fist example. I didn't make it. So. No,
but like as far as those Netflix series are concerned, Luke Cage, I appreciated but didn't fall in love with.
Yeah, it was fine.
What's the girl? She's from my area.
Oh, okay.
She's like, I remember her. We used to go to the same hardcore shows and stuff. She's a really cool girl. A couple years older than me, but awesome chick. But that Punisher series, for as much as the alt-right weirdos glom onto it and the like, it has a great emotional core. I found myself not only enthralled by it, but identifying with it on certain levels, not the self-righteous Bible thumping gun nut ideals that are espoused in it, but the original intent of the outcast Vietnam veteran that was Frank Castle, I think was really portrayed really well on that specific series, even though
I think those are an example, and you see that in general in TV series in general. I think creators are getting a lot more leeway to do what they want, and I think a lot of that has come from the streaming services. It doesn't have to adhere to, a commercial break. It has to be this length. You see certain series where one episode is 30 minutes, another one's 45 minutes. You're telling a certain story within a certain time frame. And I think that's been really liberating for that medium.
Yeah,
and I think that's why it's working so well, and you're getting so much good TV now. I mean, you think of before, the 80s, there wasn't much good television. There's some gems in there, don't get me wrong, but it was more movies. Now, not to say that there's not great movies, there's great movies. I feel there's way more better TV series because there's so much more depth going on to telling a long form story, and I think it's just all genres too. I mean, I'm seeing so many things like getting out of the typical genres that I watch. I mean, I love Euphoria. I think that's a brilliant show.
Excellent. Yep. Yellow Jackets.
Oh. Yes, which has some horror in it, but but
so good.
They're going into some weird places with that show.
Yep.
There was one that I watched recently. It had Mark Ruffalo in it, and I can't remember the name of it now.
Oh, about the two brothers?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was excellent.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it now, but it was really good. I wouldn't have normally watched that, but I'm like, it sounds interesting. Okay, I'll give it a shot.
Well, that's because it really happened.
Yeah.
But conversely, as much as I love the source material and really wanted to love the show, I think Preacher. I wanted to love Preacher because I love that comic book.
It is one of my all-time favorite series. So.
Oh, did it lose the plot? Did that lose the plot as a series?
Yeah, and it's weird because they had some really great casting choices. The guy that was Cassidy was perfect. The guy who played Air Star, could they have found a better guy to play that character?
Never.
I don't think so. They nailed those two characters, I think, perfectly.
Yep.
And I think once they got past the first season and got into some of the comic content, it got better.
Yeah.
But it they didn't have the same.
The darkness was lost.
I think The Boys is doing what Preacher should have done. I think they're changing some things as they have to from comic to screen. It's nailing the vibe so much better.
The sense of menace is there.
Yeah, and again, casting Homelander. Who else could play that role?
No, that guy's phenomenal. He's phenomenal.
There's no way that guy was born to play Homelander.
I'll never look at him as anything but.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because we were both coming from Garth Ennis source material.
Yeah,
and you see one thing that didn't quite succeed, but one thing I think is really nailing it, pretty much knocking it out of the park. Really, I'm
really, really interested to see if within the context of Garth Ennis, if Crossed is ever going to make it. I know they tried to do an animated series and it didn't work because
that would be insane. That would be rated X. I mean,
if not worse. If not worse, yeah.
It's so insane. It's so violent, so depraved. I don't think it would ever happen to the point it could happen, but it would be so dumbed down.
Yeah, they would have to homogenize it to the point where it wouldn't be the same thing.
Yeah, so I almost don't want it to happen because it's just if they're not going to be able to do it to that extremity, because that's kind of the whole point of that. It's just let's push it all the way. what can we get away with in this? You know?
Yeah, what's the absolute worst of the human condition that we could possibly espouse within the content of a comic book?
And all that stuff is in The Boys and Preacher too, you know, which is why I was like, how are they going to pull this off? You know, how are they going to do some of this stuff that's in Preacher? And some of it they've done, some of it they obviously had to sidestep, you know, because just they're not going to be able to do that on network television.
No.
Which is unfortunate, you know, because it's like if they had been able to do it faithfully, it's just like, ooh, this would have been something else, man. But, you know, the cross, I just don't, it is just so extreme. I don't think that they would ever be able to be given justice at all.
And, you know, speaking of that, like of the two novels of yours that I think would lend itself to a cinematic experience, you know, Secrets of the Weird definitely not only has an inherently cinematic feel to it, but a bankability on sequels. I mean, even just as a novel, you know, like that's just open to like sequels and universe building. But how the fuck would anybody film that and get away with it?
There's some stuff in there that, you know, it would be interesting.
Well, I mean, that's why I just take Sexy Leper off the table, because
Sexy Leper would have to be totally like an independent film, like something that it didn't have a studio involved in it. Like,
yeah,
no, it would just, because there's just stuff that you have to have in there. Otherwise, don't bother.
That, you know? Like that Edward Lee novel, Header.
Yeah.
They made a movie out of that. And
I never saw the movie.
Yeah, it's not worth seeing, but they at least try to include everything therein. And anyone who knows, any of my listeners who know anything about Header, a header is a very sexually violent act of vengeance.
Oh yeah, that's a wild one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, I don't know, Secrets of the Weird would lend itself, I think, to the television series format more. I think because you got so much going on, like it wouldn't work as an hour and a half movie,
right?
I think because there's just so many different storylines going on that you could have to have something where you have continual things going on. This character's arc is going on here, and then you cut to this character's arc, and eventually they converge at some point. But like, I don't know if it would work in, you know, such a contained thing. It would need more room, because there is more room even beyond what I've written that you can build on. You know, there's just so much more you can do with what's already there on the page, expanding upon and give even more to those characters' experiences, that I feel it needs more room to breathe than it already has.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could almost bypass the title of the novel and just base it on the town.
Yeah, I mean, the town is a character.
Yeah. Yeah. In all honesty, yeah, you could just call it Sweetville, and there it is.
Right.
There's your story. There's your. So, with all that in mind and being laid out on the table, what's next, I guess, is just the between the record and the short stories that you're trying to put out there. What else is on the horizon?
I wanted to do some more comic work. I've only had a couple of things, you know, a couple of shorts and one 3-issue series that unfortunately, right when it came out, the company went under, so it didn't get a lot of traction. But it's something I'm very proud of. That by the way, was called Hag, and it's only on Comicsology at this point, I think. But it's you know, it's probably the most straightforward horror thing I've ever written. But it has a lot of emotional weight to it at the same time. So because I was able to successfully do that and get a publisher for that, it made me realize, okay, I can, you know, get my foot in the door with comics. I want to do more at some point. My younger brother, who is an artist, we've been kind of sort of off and on working on this pitch for a comic project that it's still in the real early stages. I jump from project to project, so I try to fit in time to work on it when I have the time. But it kind of boils down to I guess if Masters of the Universe was created by David Cronenberg, something kind of like that is kind of the angle. It came from my brother's idea, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to write this. I need to put enough of my stamp on it. You give me kind of the skeleton of it, and kind of take it in my direction, and we'll work on it together and bounce ideas off each other, obviously. And if you don't like something, obviously we're not going to do it, but like, I want to get some body horror in here and like really push that, but we'll push this fantastical element just because you just don't get that sort of combination. So I don't know. It's something that hopefully we'll get completed and be able to pitch at some point, but it's just like one of those things. It's like it could find a home on Image or Dark Horse or something. I mean, it's just something that might work on one of those sort of publishers. So yeah, I do want to do more comic work, just because, again, I think that was really my first love as a young reader, so it's just a world to me. But it is really hard to get. I'd say getting into that world is harder than any other writing.
Yeah, that's pretty much like lightning in a bottle. Like the fact that James O'Barr ever got any traction with The Crow still blows my mind to this day, but it was right place, right time.
Which I met him at a con a couple years ago, and I gave him a copy of Secrets of the Weird. I'm like, I think you might like this. Because I'm a big fan of your stuff, and I think you'll get this. I never heard anything, but who knows? Maybe he read it, maybe he liked it. I don't know.
I'm sure he did. I mean, James O'Barr is nothing if not a thinker, so it would make sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the only thing that's kind of like being worked on, other than just like random short stories. Sometimes I'll see a call for something that I want to write for. I have a couple that, I have making the rounds, the submission rounds, when I find someplace, oh, this might fit, I have like 4 or 5 short stories that haven't been published yet that I'm trying to find a good home for. And there's one that I think I'm just done with at this point. It's gone through so many places. I'm like, maybe this one's never going to see a home. It's just one of those ones. It's like, it's too fucking weird. It's just like, this one doesn't make any sense. Nobody's going to read this one. So sometimes you just have to realize there's the one that's just not ever going to get that home. I think that's fine. But, I've had some stories that the first place I sent it to bought it. I've had some that took, 3 or 4 years before they found the right home. You just never know.
Yeah. You don't know what the zeitgeist is going to be at that time.
That right moment at the right place. Oh, this is the perfect home for this. Boom. There we go. We found it. Great.
Yeah, like someday, like Deadite Press or whomever are going to be like, well, okay, this is right where we need to be. Grab it.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, that's kind of all. I went through a little funk for a while, over the past year or so. I think a lot of people have been in weird funks, through everything that's been going on in the world. But I think once I got the, gray matter wanting to publish my new book, I'm like, I got a fire under my ass again. So I really want to start working on stuff. I am working on a novella that is about done with the first draft. And when I say first draft, my first drafts are actually probably more like most people's like 5th drafts, because I don't track them as a normal draft. It's because I'm the kind of writer where I got to get a sentence perfect at that moment.
Yeah, I understand.
So even if it's not going to be the right final sentence, it's got to be right at that moment. So I obsess on it at that time. So there's a lot of rewriting before I finish a draft, essentially.
That's how you know you're writing for yourself and not everyone else.
Yeah. It's my process. It's not the best way, probably, realistically, as far as like producing the most work. But for me, it's the way that it works creatively. It's just how I have to do it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I do have a novella that could be interesting if I pull it off the way I want it to be. It's definitely dark and carnal, like a lot of my shit. So, I think that's kind of all that's really in my queue right now, which is a lot.
Yeah, it's more than enough.
Always have something.
Well, I have to say I'm really blown away by this whole conversation, to be honest with you. We have more in common than most people I interview. So this has been
that's cool. You know, I mean, it's really rewarding to me, you know, to meet somebody not only that I have so much in common with, but that really gets me on that creative level. You know, like you are exactly the kind of target audience for my books. Like,
yeah.
It's hard to find that traction, you know, as an author in the small press, to find an audience for your work. And I knew, especially with Secrets of the Weird, that it's like, this is a book for the misfits of the world.
Yeah. Which
there are a lot of them out there. They just haven't found the book yet. You know, it's like when I'm at book fairs and, you know, I'm a member of the Horror Writers Association. So it's like, I'll be working the Horror Writers Association table, which we're, you know, promoting our organization, but we're also selling books. If I see somebody that looks even slightly, you know, punk or slightly goth or just slightly, you know, they're an alternative person, I'm like, come here. You know, or sometimes they'll come, they'll see, you know, they'll see the cover of the book and what is this? Or they see sexy, what is this? What the hell is this? You know, and it's like, you want this. You know, it's like, you know, it really, that's who I want. You know, I want like-minded people to read my book. And I feel like if they find it, they will like it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I just feel like that on a just a deep level. You know, people like you and I, we know we don't fit in the grand scheme of things. You know, we were punk for a reason. You know, I think it's one of those things. It's like there's people that go fly by night through the scene. You know, they're there for a couple of years and then they're out, and then they weren't meant to be there. Yeah. But those of us that stick with it and keep those ideals and keep, you know, digging into things that are left of center and in the underground, it's a certain personality type, and it's a certain kind of person who is that way, and it's the lifers, you know. Okay. But those people have to start somewhere. You know, they have to be, you know, when we were young, when we were teenagers, you know, we didn't fit in then either. You know? Yeah. I wasn't cool even in the context of the scene we were in. So yeah, it's just like, you know, it's just one of those things. If you don't fit, you know, if you're the square peg in the round hole, where do you go? You know, you go to the punk stuff, you go to the goth stuff. It makes sense. It's an alternative to all the normie shit that you're supposed to be getting into. You know, I don't know, and it is very rewarding to me when I get to talk to people that have really gotten what they were supposed to get out of what I've created. It's just like that makes it all worth it. You know, I mean, obviously it'd be nice to be making, you know, big bucks on this shit. You know, yeah, I'm not going to turn it away. You know, no, nor should you. The more people, the merrier. I ain't going to turn that shit away. But the most rewarding thing is to really know that somebody got it. You know, that they understood it. They got some reward out of it. And they got the intent. You know, it's not always going to be spot on, but when it's right in that ballpark, and I think you have gotten closer to that, you know, spot on than most people that I've talked to, it's just like, okay, you know I'm doing the right thing. I know that there is a readership out here for what I do. Yeah, people will get it, but some people won't. But the people that do, they're the ones I'm writing for. And I guess what you have over your normal author, novelist, what have you, is the fact that you're going to have the people that adhere to it in a really real and visceral way that aren't going to adhere to, like, you know, a Michael Crichton novel. Yeah. Or whomever is writing, you know, whatever at this point. I couldn't even tell you anymore because yeah, that's just not in my world, I guess. You know, it's just the books you buy at the airport kind of thing. yeah, it's not like I'm completely beholden to what I would have purchased prior to being stuck in an international flight, you know. Okay. I brought this from home because I knew I was going to be held up. Oh yeah. Never take a flight without at least one book.
No. And for as much of a Luddite as I can and very much am, I can be and very much am. I prefer having something in print. I prefer opening it, smelling it, tactile experience, just like my vinyl. Yep. I like a book, but
I know.
The advent of the Kindle and, to have a library at my disposal at all times on an electronic device, it's been a godsend in travel situations specifically.
Yeah, at some point I might have to, really consider going there. I do it with comics sometimes. It's just a space issue. Like I can't be that way with my music. I'm just too much of a vinyl guy. I mean, I have I have a bunch of MP3s on my iPod, but it's like stuff that's like rare demos that you can't get, or stuff like that, or just things that I don't need to own necessarily. Like there's just like, I like a couple songs, things like that. But like, I can't go like digital with my music. That's just not going to happen. No. Like books, it's like I don't have a huge house. I only have so much room. At some point, my books are just, at this point, they are overflowing the shelves. It's like, I keep people want to buy books. It's like, what do I do, I mean, there's the library, sure. I could do that to some degree, but I'm not going to find all the things I want.
No.
I'll find a couple things I want, But, at some point, it may just have to be, I may have to just bite the bullet and try out the Kindle thing for that. I don't want to. But
No, I submitted to it. That's basically what it came down to, because I was left with, being married and my wife, like, how many fucking hardcore t-shirts and hoodies and pairs of fucking Nikes and records can you possibly own as a 45-year-old adult man?
I understand. I know this pain.
So I guess I could just say, okay, I'll put my books on this little electronic device as a start.
Yeah.
And sell some of my old, first run Ink and Dagger t-shirts that haven't fit me since they were a band. I'll sell them off for a ridiculous amount of money, and then, buy some more books to put onto my little electronic.
Yeah, it's just it's a matter of finding that balance. I mean, I have to, and I'm fine with that. It's some things have to go sometimes. It's with my record collection, I have so much room, so I'm always recycling stuff. Something's got to go, something's coming in, something's got to go.
Yeah.
I don't have a mansion.
nor do I, but in the same token, right behind me, I probably have 4 or 5 different versions of Neurosis Through Silver and Blood on different pressings, and like Seaweed Span Away on vinyl, which nobody fucking has.
Yeah.
Like I have a sickness, and it can only be sated with more of these fetishized items.
Oh yeah, believe me, I know.
Yeah, I know you do. I
mean, you see the things I'm posting online, and stuff, and it's only a fraction of it.
Yeah.
But it's like at the same time, it's like I don't even I think of like the amount of stuff I've actually owned over the years just as a whole versus what I currently have, and it's just like astronomical, but because of that recycling process, it just only have X amount at any given time. But between just being a music lover for so long and then working at Tower Records for so many years, and that more so got me a lot of CD promos, and there wasn't a whole lot of vinyl in that part of my life. I was still obviously buying vinyl at shows and stuff and distros and things like that. But that built up a CD collection that got insane that has since been pared down. Yeah. But I got so many, it was just like, oh my God. Yeah.
I have legitimately about 175 30 boxes of CDs in my attic right now. They have to go. What am I going to do? What am I going to do with 4 different versions on CD of Cradle of Filth Vampire? Who fucking wants that? Nobody wants that. Get it the fuck out of my life.
I think I've got my CDs down to the bare minimum of things that either aren't available on vinyl, are way too fucking expensive for me to acquire on vinyl.
Yeah.
Or just I don't care. Like just something that I like this, but I don't need it on vinyl. It's something like I have a couple of Radiohead CDs. I don't need a fucking vinyl version of that. Right. But I like the computer and the Bends a lot, so I'm going to keep those.
Well, the fact of the matter with that too is they came out with deluxe versions of OK Computer that have like 3 records in them and everything, and you could just toss everything else and get that. I've pared it down where I'm selling a lot of stuff on eBay, and what I keep are things that came in. They were like the cardboard sleeve CDs that look like LPs. Revelation did that. New Age Records did that.
I think it's damaged so easy.
I keep all that stuff, and everything else I kind of just, especially on the metal side of the spectrum, it's like it's available. I could get rid of that. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a Luddite. That's my problem.
Yeah. Oh, I'm totally that way. But it's for me, it's part of the experience. Like I can't just detach myself from the physicality of even, yeah, sure. Like I said, I have some CDs, but the vinyl for me is so much better for not only I prefer the way, it sounds and the way it looks and the whole feel of it, but the artwork is so much more involved, and that's something you just don't get with having a streaming service, you just get this little square, you don't get the whole picture,
Yeah, you can't smell it. You can't look at a thanks list. You don't know what bands they were friends with at that time.
Yeah.
The whole process of discovery is completely and utterly wiped clean.
Yeah, and I still revel in that stuff. When I get a new record, I love looking through, reading the lyrics, and just absorbing all the art, and just I got this record recently from this band Tower 7, who I got. It would have been in my top of the year last year, but I didn't get it until a couple of weeks ago. But it's just incredible. Like, not only is it musically just exactly what I want to hear out of hardcore right now, but it's just when I opened up the packaging, it's just had this huge poster insert, another little poster insert. They really put thought into what they were doing, and it just reminded me of the days when bands used to really care about that. Not that it ever completely stopped, but it seemed to be much more common when all you had was that physicality. You didn't have the digital option, and you pretty much had to make your statement with that. And so it just really brought me back. And it's like, oh, there are bands that are still doing this that made me so happy. It's just such an artistic statement to really just do that. And especially with how expensive it is to do records these days, to add anything extra, an additional insert, an additional this or that is, to me, it means you're the real deal. You really want this.
That's why when my band's record came out a couple of years ago, I included not just lyrics, it was a zine. Mm-hmm. Nice tiny little zine just to tuck in there. Yeah. And there's probably 8 people who were like, yeah, that was really cool. But for those eight people, they really enjoyed it. So
yeah, hey,
that's why I consider this what I do now. This podcast, it's just my new fanzine.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of podcasts in a lot of ways have sort of taken that place, because there's some zines that still pop up now and then, but I just don't think it's that of great interest to most people anymore, because they can get access to so much information online. But podcasts, I think, in a lot of ways have sort of been that sort of information highway. You get to interview, the drummer of your favorite band on a podcast or something, something like that, and get to know their something about them, but in a much deeper dive. So in a sense, there's a lot of things about it that's better. I mean, you're not getting asking, most podcasts aren't asking basic 90s hardcore fanzine questions like,
are you vegan?
What do you think about veganism?
Yeah. Are you vegan /XE?
Something like that. just like, oh.
What do you think about slave labor in Burma?
Yeah. Or just, what do you think about this? You know, you get to think, am I going to make the right answer? What's the right answer here? It's got to be the best answer.
And I told you we weren't going to be on here for an hour and a half.
Oh yeah, looking at the clock, we are running right into that almost hard stop time, aren't we? Almost.
Yeah, we're like way into where you said you were going to have to bail out because
it's almost burrito time.
Yeah. So
very important in my household.
So with that being said, what do you want to leave us with, brother?
I don't know. I didn't think about that. I mean, I guess I'll just say I really appreciate, you taking the time to give a shit about the stuff that I've created, that means so much to me. And, I hope, some other people maybe discover at least one of the things that I've done.
Right.
Via this, that would be cool. Whether it's my new band or one of my books or even one of my old bands or something, I don't care. If you discover something out of this, great. I think that's awesome because my life in so many ways just revolves around my creative projects. All the various things that I do. It's a huge part of who I am. Mm-hmm. As a human, I feel like not that I'm thinking, I'm doing some greater good or some greater purpose, but I feel it's just a huge part of my purpose to be here is to create things that I find interesting and hopefully other people do too. Yeah. So yeah, it just means a lot that you would, even bother to give me the time of day to be on your podcast. So thank you.
I'm a big fan. So it's my honor and my pleasure to have you. And, I hope to have you on again someday when we have, the next novel ready to roll or next record or whatever you have going.
Count me in.
All right, brother.
Very nice finally meeting you and talking to you other than our little messages we've been having. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Likewise.
Awesome.
All right, brother.
Have a good rest of your night.
You as well.
Later,
brother.
Chad's pretty great, isn't he? It was an excellent time talking to him. It was definitely my pleasure having gotten to sit down with him and, unpack some of his writing and musical inspirations. Talk a little bit about where he comes from and, really getting to know the person behind the art. It's not often that you run across too many singers from hardcore bands that are also accomplished horror authors and are willing to, sort of tread upon the themes that he's ensconced in with these two novels, between class war, between, body dysmorphia. There's a very great sense of empathy for people who are drug addicts, people who live the street life. There's so much going on here that I think if you come from any subculture whatsoever, you're going to find something within these novels that's going to grab you, and it's going to, give you something to latch onto outside of just the extremity of the situations and the gore, and these aren't just horror novels. These books are about the human experience, just put under a magnifying glass, amplified, and shot through the prism of some very, very messed up stuff. So I know it's been a long one. We really got deep into it, and I'm glad you stuck around to listen. So on behalf of everyone here at 3:33 a.m. Studios, he's been Chad. I've been Peter. You've been beautiful. Please like, rate, review, subscribe, and tune in again next week. Thank you all so very much. This has been the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. Good night, everyone.